clinics in Michigan that offer abortions are facing uncertainty.
Doctors here have not experienced this much confusion or uncertainty really since last summer, since Roe was overturned, especially since, residents here in Michigan in November voted to put abortion rights in the state constitution. And yet, even here, this method is still under threat.
Kate Wells reporting. Later today, President Biden is expected to sign an executive order creating the White House Office of Environmental Justice. NPR's Shema Byram reports.
A White House official says the executive order will require agencies to let nearby communities know when federal facilities release toxic materials into the environment. It also calls for more investment into scientific research on environmental and racial health disparities. Inspired by the civil rights movement, environmental justice seeks to repair and avoid past harms of pollution and energy production, mostly in poor communities and communities of color. In making the announcement this afternoon, President Biden is expected to draw a contrast with Republicans who want to repeal sections of a big climate-focused budget bill passed last year. Shema Byram, NPR News.
The Department of Veterans Affairs will stop the rollout of a new electronic health system. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports the troubled program contributed to the deaths of several vets.
In 2018, VA signed a $16 billion no-bid contract with Oracle Cerner for a new electronic health system. 5 years in, just 5 sites nationwide use it, but the rollout has caused errors that VA links to at least 4 deaths and many injuries. This week, the system crashed for 5 hours, leaving clinicians and patients at those sites in limbo. Now VA says it will stop the nationwide rollout of the system. VA officials wouldn't discuss ongoing contract negotiations with Oracle Cerner about extending the deal for another 5 years. Bills in Congress from both parties aim to modify or even scrap the new system. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
The Justice Department is charging 18 people with fraud in connection with health care schemes linked to the pandemic. Some of those charged are doctors. Federal prosecutors allege the suspects misused federal government programs intended to help test and treat people with COVID-19. The Justice Department says it seized more than $16 million in cash and other proceeds. On Wall Street, stocks are lower. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 30 points. The Nasdaq is down nearly 15. This is NPR.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. The Coast Guard continues to search by air and sea for a fisherman missing in waters off Cape Ann, as the family and friends of 3 other men mourn their loss. The Coast Guard says the 3 men were unresponsive when they were recovered near their 17-foot boat about 7 miles off of Cape Ann late yesterday. Fishing fleet owner Phil Eastman says experienced fishing crews know that springtime can bring challenging conditions at sea.
Very, very sad because great people going out to catch fish and they're having a good time, but they don't realize the dangers this time of year.
Local fishermen say the ocean was rough this week. The men were heading for fishing grounds 50 miles offshore near Jeffrey's Ledge. Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote the head of the New England office of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency this week, asking questions about the cleanup of the Housatonic River. New England Public Media's Nancy Cohen has our story.
As part of the river cleanup, the EPA issued a permit allowing General Electric, which contaminated the river, to build a disposal site for lower levels of PCB waste in the town of Lee. Warren wrote the EPA asking about any recent conversations the agency has had with towns on the river. The EPA says it shares the senator's commitment to working with local partners. The letter comes after Warren's staff met with town officials from Lee who say there's a potential drinking water aquifer directly under the site of the planned dump. Select Board Chair Sean Renier said that he hopes this is the first of many conversations about the aquifer and alternative cleanup options. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Nancy Cohen.
It's sunny and 47 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Storyworth. Each week, Storyworth emails a loved one a question about their life. After a year, they'll publish family memories into a bound book to keep forever. Learn more at Storyworth.com.
And for more original reporting, visit gbhnews.org.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. Marjorie is off yet again today, but she is back on Monday. Former Secretary of Public Safety for the Commonwealth, Andrea Cabral, joins us again. Hello, Andrea.
Hello. You're so lucky to have the pleasure of my company 2 days in a row.
It's very nice of you, particularly, to say that. Thank you very much. And right back at you, if you know what I mean. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. So the last time the Massachusetts House of Representatives voted on rent control, that was 3 years ago in 2020, it failed miserably, 136 to 23. But how many of those who voted against the proposal, which, by the way, today has the support of roughly 3/4 of the people who live in Boston, could have been influenced by their own personal stake in the matter? A new spectacular piece out in the Globe this morning by Emma Platoff and Matt Stout lays bare how many state legislators are moonlighting as landlords. Almost 90% of the lawmakers are homeowners, and about 20% of the legislature own commercial, residential, or short-term rental properties. In one extreme example, Senator Barry Feingold owns more than 50 properties worth a mere $42 million. In other words, they have actual skin in the game, conflicts, one might say. So at 877-301-8970, call or text, 2 questions for you. The one we ask every few months, where are you today on the whole notion of rent control, rent stabilization? By the way, the WU proposal is not a mandate. It would be a local option. If the legislature votes yes, individual cities and towns decide what to do. Where are you on that rent control proposal? And 2, regardless of where you are on the issue itself, are you concerned about the ability of landlord legislators to judge this fairly when a no vote would benefit them financially? The number is 877-301-8970. I have to say my head almost popped off when I read the story today. By the way, it's perfectly legal that they own all this property, but had it not been for the fabulous reporting of the Globe, and had, unless you decided to go wherever it is, 1 Ashburton Place or something, and dig through the financial disclosures of 200 members of the House, when they vote on rent control, whenever it is, you'd have no idea if it was on the issue or if it was on their own damn pocketbook.
No, people should understand this. So, when you're an elected official, you have to file an ethics disclosure. And if someone wants to see that ethics disclosure, they have to go in person, and I believe it's to 1 Ashburton Place, and actually apply for it. And they have to fill out a form where they identify themselves, and you get a copy of that as the filer. Like I have
the elected official knows if I go to ask.
Sure. I've had probably over 28 years in public service. Mine has been requested maybe like 5 or 6 times, maybe 7 times. It's almost always a reporter for some reason. But I have had a couple of civilians, sort of bloggers sometimes want to know. But you have to physically go to 1 Ashburton in order to get that. Right. And then you have to sort of understand what the disclosures mean. So it's a lot of effort. If that's what the Globe did to get this information, that's a lot of effort.
Does it, I'm, by the way, I was a former, in the spirit of full disclosure, unlike some of these people, I was a rent control lawyer. I represented tenants in the South Bronx in rent control, rent stabilization settings when I was a kid lawyer and, for 7 or 8 years. Even if they've complied with all disclosure, as you were just saying, it's pretty hard to get this stuff. They can't be faulted for that. It seems to me on such a critical issue where you have such direct financial interest in the outcome, there's got to be some higher level of voluntary, non-statutory required disclosure. I mean, I know Barry Feingold only slightly. It would seem to me I would want to know that he owns $42 million in property and as a landlord legislator before he voted, so that, that is pretty obvious. Do you, by the way, I don't know if I'm overreacting to this. Do you have the same feeling I do or no?
No, the reason that I'm smiling is because even though our legislators are considered full-time legislators, it's actually a full-time job, nearly all of them do something else. They are a lot of lawyers. Real estate agents, a ton of lawyers. Yeah. They have various other jobs. Remember, John Santiago was a doctor.
Of course.
Right? So,
who's now the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Right. He was at BMC and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the laws that are promulgated probably carry a myriad amount of potential conflicts of interest. That said, you're supposed to avoid actual conflict and the appearance of conflict. So there's got to be a place in the middle where the public is at least aware. Or you should have to abstain.
Well, I can't believe, I'm so glad you said that, because when you were done saying disclosure, I'm saying to myself, if a guy or a woman in the legislature will clearly profit financially if rent control is defeated, I'm trying to think if it was somebody who I don't have much good feeling for, I don't know, like an Associate Justice Clarence Thomas. Should that legislator recuse him or herself because they will benefit financially from a no vote? And I think my answer, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe we'll get callers that convince me otherwise, I think the answer is no.
That they should not
They should not vote. Yeah,
they should not vote.
Which means there'll be nobody to vote, essentially, for the 19
what I was
renters
going to say
and the damn thing.
That this is something that requires some real thought about what constitutes even the appearance of a conflict and whether that is worthy of abstention, or if only actual conflict is worthy of abstention. Appearance of conflict merits a higher degree of disclosure, perhaps. But to some degree, it is almost antithetical to politics, where in the way that decisions are made, sometimes with the lack of debate, and all it comes down to is a vote and sometimes a non-vote.
That's a very good point.
So how this all ends out, you can take a sort of a pristine view, a purer view of it, and just say it's either a vote or non-vote, participate or don't participate. But the devil's in the details, and how that actually works with getting anything done is a big deal.
Let me just say one last thing that I know you're tired of having me say, and so I'll say it and get it over with. We talk about anti-majoritarian behavior by Congress and the Supreme Court all the time. 65% of the people in Massachusetts support rent stabilization or rent control. 75% support it in Boston. If people in Boston want it in Boston, why is it the business of legislators? I know what a home rule petition means in 350 other cities and towns. Unfortunately, that's the law, number one. But number two, I know this is a radical notion. Even if you're a landlord who would benefit and you're a legislator, if 65% of the people in the state support something, maybe you should vote for it because they actually want it to happen, kind of thing. I repeat, the vote last time was a narrow, what was the defeat? 136 to 23. I wonder why that was.
And the 23 are renters, so.
Exactly, yeah. That's right. 877-301-8970. So a lot of stuff's on the table. Where are you? We haven't talked about rent control in 3 or 4 months. Where are you on the whole notion of local option rent control? It's not a statewide mandate. Mayor Wu's bill would allow individual cities and towns, if this state legislation passes, to implement a form of rent control or rent stabilization. Where are you on that? And 2, are you troubled at all by what is the clear conflict of interest on the part of landlord legislators, lots of them, on a vote like this? Let's start in Waltham with Philip. Hey, Philip.
Hi, Philip.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I think that we should go back to Bernie Sanders' idea, which is that a lot of our social problems and our economic problems are caused by corporations not paying enough money to people who work for them. When I listened to your program over the years, I noticed that so many of the topics that you talk about wouldn't even exist if people had the right income. So talking about whether the legislature should do this or that, to me, that's a downstream viewpoint. We should go upstream of the problem, which is that all of this disappears if people can pay their own rent because they make the proper amount of money.
You're right, but I mean, at the same time, obviously you're right, but at this same time, this is real and it's in front of the legislature, number one.
Yeah, okay.
And number two, I assume if you're a Sanders supporter, you also support the notion that there should be equitable rents, not the ability of property owners to raise rents whatever they choose and make as much money as they choose. So those go hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I support you, and I support that idea that you're talking about. But I think the time would be better spent solving the foundational problem.
Got it.
Why don't you talk about that? Why don't you talk about that on your program?
Well, we talk about wealth inequities in this country like nonstop, frankly. So maybe you should listen a little more, and you'll hear us talk about it. And feel free to call anytime you want, Philip, with that message. Thank you for the call. 877-301-8970.
So to your point about sort of this anti-majoritarian bent, the same thing happened with cannabis. And that's why it ended up being sort of a ballot question. And now is a very good time to talk about, even in what we consider to be, it's clearly a Democratic legislature or democratically led legislature, primarily or majority Democrats, but we really should be talking about anti-majoritarian bent toward elected officials generally. And I'm not one to, say doing it in a nonpartisan way, given the way I feel about the GOP. But that level of power brings with it the ability to ignore the very people that you took an oath to represent.
You know why that is, by the way? I think this may be your point, even though you're a big-time Democrat, because there's no Republican Party. And when an elected official is not worried about his or her job, then they can do whatever the hell they want, and even if it is anti-majoritarian. If there was a Republican Party and John Doe was worried about losing his or her seat, then there'd be a decent shot that they'd be more responsive to the people who actually vote.
I get it. And when you said that, what it made me wonder was how many, even though there were very, very few Republicans in the legislature, how they voted. Or whether or not there was this Globe report
I'm
indicates
sure they're
that
all
their
anti-rent
landlords,
control because property owners generally, which is a key constituency, are generally against it. Nevertheless, having two parties relatively equally is good for small d democracy. Can we agree?
Yes, as long as one of them isn't completely insane, fascist, racist. And I think that's fine.
That's a good qualifier. Thank you for that. Well, actually, a few people agree with you on that, Andrew. Where do you want to go next, Andrew?
I think we should talk to Barbara in Gloucester. It's probably gorgeous there today.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, how you doing? And yes, it is gorgeous here. I want to say to the gentleman that was on before,
Philip,
he's absolutely correct that the corporate does need to pay more, but you can be guaranteed that without rent control, even if a person is paid more money, the rents will go up. I hate to say it, but 75% of these people, they're running this gig because they want to make money, and that's it. But you had a show on before where you talked about something called the next tsunami would be a wave of homeless elderly people, and that is happening now. Here in Gloucester, I have friends that are in their 80s that are on a waiting list that goes on for forever. And the fact that congressmen can have their money invested in stocks for oil while they're fighting on a bill, and the same way with the legislators. This has to be out in the open. People have to know that these people are real estate agents. I don't give a damn what anybody thinks. This needs to be clear to the public and not just in a little article on page 9 of the Globe. It's going to be a big issue.
Well, it was actually the lead of the website, but you're totally right. It shouldn't depend upon a news outlet doing its job extraordinarily well. There should be an affirmative obligation on elected officials to have as much disclosure as will allow his or her constituents to make fair decisions. Barbara, that was an excellent call. And by the way, GBH's Priced Out series, Zoe, our colleague, is reminding me, they did profiles, including of a 72-year-old woman on the North Shore, we think it was Essex, who lived in her car for a year while she tried to find housing. By the way, that got almost 1 million views on YouTube, which shows that people really care about it. So I'm really glad you raised that issue, and it is really painful. It's a really painful thing.
Well, we're housing people in hotels.
Yeah.
And the state is paying for that.
Yeah.
And the idea, I totally understand Barbara's point about, the rents will go up even if there's rent control. But it'll be better monitored because it's rent control. And we at least should try rent control as a mechanism for getting more housing in the lives of people who absolutely need it.
I want to speak to this just one more time, this anti-majoritarian thing. If I was an elected official, which unfortunately I was for 2 years as a Cambridge City Councilor, I hope that there are instances when an elected official says, even though my constituents want X, as a matter of principle, I'm going to be honest about it with them. I'm going to vote Y. I'm not saying you shouldn't vote your conscience in principle. The default position, and tell me as a former, well, you were an elected official as the sheriff. You were elected.
10 years, yeah.
Right. Obviously, as a Secretary of Public Safety, you were appointed by Governor Patrick. The default position should be, if there's a clear message from your constituents about what they want, unless you, again, have this deeply principled moral objection. You should follow the lead of your constituents. I mean, is that not
Yes.
exactly like Congress should on things like guns, reproductive freedom, and all that sort of stuff? This is just another example.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think you saw it during, there were several of our legislators that sort of, some stood on their, deeply held belief. I think it was around equal marriage. People will take to that was back when they did more of debate and sort of open discussion of laws, which has sort of gone by the wayside. But people talked about their vote in terms of their personal beliefs. Some said, even though I believe X, my constituents want Y, and that's why I'm voting that way. Others said, my constituents want Y, but I believe in X, and that's why I'm voting that way. And it's at least the next time a little bit more about who you're voting for and how they will vote when their beliefs stand in opposition to your own.
Well, Ted Kennedy, Mario Cuomo were against abortion. And they voted and acted pro-choice because that's their view, was their personal position should not interfere. The next call is from Cambridge. Before we welcome her, another piece of history which people may be unfamiliar with, and I'm only telling this so that I can really get into a rage as the show gets started. People may recall we used to have rent control in 3 cities and towns. I know there were Cambridge, Boston, and I think Brookline. There was a ballot question in 1994 statewide to repeal rent control. I don't know if you know this, Andrea. The question prevailed, the repeal, by 51 to 49, so the people have spoken. That's not the significant part. The 3 communities that actually had rent control overwhelmingly voted to keep rent control. The 348 cities and towns that did not have rent control and weren't affected voted overwhelmingly to reject rent control, which is sort of an analogy to what this legislature has done historically. Kathy in Cambridge, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. Thanks for having my call.
Sure.
And thank you for this conversation.
Sure.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to get everything I want to say.
Do what you can.
Call, but I'm a low-income renter in Cambridge, and I really think our legislature is a disgrace. I mean, you talk about not having 2 parties. We do kind of have 2 parties. Within the Democratic Party, most of the people, I would say, in our legislature are really what used to be Republicans. And the fact that, I don't think we're going to get rent control. When I moved to Cambridge, we had rent control. I lived in a rent control apartment, and it was great. Cambridge was completely different back then.
Totally.
There were all kinds of people. I really hate Cambridge now. If I could move out of Cambridge, I would, but I can't because I have an apartment that for now at least I can afford.
Good.
Most of the city councilors fund their elections with money from the developers, so they're not impartial.
Well, by the way, I have to say, I don't know all the city councilors anymore. A decent number of them care deeply about the plight of low-income renters.
I'm sorry, they say they care deeply, and they say they want to build all these units. But they do not care about the lives of the people that live in the units currently. We have no right.
Okay.
We don't have right of there's no condo conversion law even in Cambridge yet. What happened to that? I voted my whole life, every election, but I'm starting to see why people don't vote because it doesn't make a difference. Like Maura Healey, I'm sorry, but fair share. Many people worked hard for that, and we've got it passed. Then she comes and gives crumbs to the low-income people and lots of tax breaks to the rich that cancel out fair share. What is that about?
Well, first of all, I agree. And thank you for your call, Kathy. The tax breaks that she would argue and has argued in the show, like corporate tax breaks, the short-term capital gains, do go to wealthier taxpayers, there's no question. But she has gone out of her way to say that she will do everything in her power to make sure that the millionaires tax, the fair share amendment, is not in any way undone by the legislature. But I happen to agree with your take on those couple of tax breaks. Speaking of her, we should have done this before we take a break, Andrea. There was some back and forth in the minds of many about where Governor Healey was on local option rent control. And this is the most recent conversation we had with her of several. This is in January of this year on our show.
From the beginning, my view has been, first of all, we've got a housing crisis. People can't afford rent. They can't afford to buy new homes. And this gets to whether or not people are going to be able to come here, stay here. I support the efforts of local communities to make decisions for themselves about what is going to work within their community. And so with every proposal, of course, the devil's always in the details. And
so you do support, again, the devil is in the details, but the concept is one that obviously you're comfortable with and support.
The concept is, yes.
Here she is. She supports the concept. So if it gets to her desk, apparently, while the details matter, there's a good likelihood she'd sign.
And I know we're getting ready to go to a break, but to Kathy's point, when you can't find a place to live, when you're moving 5 times in a year because the rents keep going up, you don't feel whatever benefits are supposedly in some of these proposals. You literally don't feel it. And where the disparity between affordable housing and market rate housing is a chasm at this point. Something more needs to be done. And if the devil is in the details, then get to the details.
I agree.
And that's what we don't do. So we're going to, on that note, we're going to take a break. We're talking about rent control and conflicts of interest on Beacon Hill. We're going to keep it going. Stay with us. Stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Next time on The World, Brazil claims to be neutral on the war in Ukraine, supporting neither Moscow nor Kyiv. But this week, Brazilian authorities suggested that countries that provide weapons to Ukraine, like the U.S., are prolonging the fighting. The White House was having none of that.
What we heard, the tone was not neutral, and it is not true.
Pressure from Brazil to end the war. It's on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and Bank of America, offering access to resources and digital tools designed to help local to global companies make moves for their businesses. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/banking-for-business. And Johnson & Wales University, from its cybersecurity center to its physician assistant lab, Johnson & Wales promotes exploration and discovery. You can explore more at jwu.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrew Cabral sitting in for Marjorie. Marjorie's back on Monday. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. If you're just joining us, we're getting a reaction to 2 things. One, your latest feelings about a local option rent control proposal before the legislature, authored by Mayor Wu. And 2, the disclosure in the Globe today that a huge number of legislators are landlord legislators who would personally benefit by defeating the rent control bill. And are you worried about whether or not they can judge this fairly? The number is 877-301-8970. Can I say one thing about the detailed discussion? Governor Healy said it, you mentioned a minute ago. If you read the details of Mayor Wu's proposal, which most people think is pretty moderate, the biggest opponents are developers who say there's a disincentive to develop new things. They're exempted from this law for 15 years. What more can you do? For the first 15 years after you build a new project, even if it would otherwise be subject to the law, it isn't. So to say she bent over backwards, to say the least, to accommodate the concerns of traditional opponents, and they still oppose it, suggests that they'll oppose anything.
Right, it's sort of an NRA model with gun control. Even if we don't, it's not going to, even if it doesn't happen in my lifetime, I'm opposing it for the sake of posterity and my heirs, to whom I will leave all of the money that I've accumulated. Pat from Sharon texted us and said, historically, the legislature is made up of the landed gentry, affluent members of the ruling class. Change for the sake of their lesser fellow citizens is not in their DNA. And to the point that I was making about having to move multiple times in a year, Ronnie texted us to say, considering I've had to move 4 times in the last 5 years, having recently seen my rent in my former Salem apartment go up a whole $1,000 a month, I say the only people against rent control are the ones who haven't suffered.
Well, there may be some truth in that. 877-301-8097. One other thing that drove me nuts this morning, and I think listeners know it's one of my pet peeves, my attitude is when you're an elected official, or what you were, Secretary of Public Safety, you have an obligation to answer fair questions from the media that matters to your constituents. Barry Feingold, again, a state senator who was perfectly entitled to own $42 million in property, when he was asked by the Globe about the whole issue of owning that much property and his ultimate vote on rent control, you know what his response was?
What?
Declined to respond, which I think, my attitude is you're entitled to presume the worst when any elected official of any party refuses to answer a totally fair and simple question.
My issue would be why decline, even if you're just looking out for your own interests. When you decline to comment, and you know, because I'm sure the Globe told him that they were going to publish a story along these lines, to your point, you're inviting people to presume the worst. Why wouldn't he, as you and I were discussing earlier, say, listen, I disclose everything in my ethics forms. Anybody who wants to know what I own can go and look that up.
Why not? Because he knows that the average voter has the attention span of a gnat. And they're not going to remember that he refused to answer the damn question. So you duck and hope that by the time it comes up, people forget that you were doing the ducking.
It is effective.
Let's go to Derek in New Hampshire. That comes from a former public official, by the way. Derek in New Hampshire, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Hi, Derek.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm a supporter of rent control. I am a supporter of a wide variety of regulations. I think that humans don't do a very good job of disciplining or regulating ourselves. So, and I think really what the conversation is more about is that elected officials are generally speaking more affluent or, have financial backing. So it just creates this situation where, people who might be more civically minded or have, disparate experiences in their life are not able to go into civic or elected, into that realm at all because they can't afford to live if they do that because there's not enough money being paid out to legislators. I mean, if there's means testing for welfare, I think, that same thing at the civic level, that there could be sliding scales for folks who make less money so that they can go into politics.
Well, the issue is not just when they get elected, how can they afford to live on the salary? The issue is getting elected. The power of incumbency is so strong, the ability of an incumbent to raise money so exceeds the ability of an average challenger to raise money, which is why a lot of people think that public financing is the only way to level that playing field that you're describing. Derek, it was a good point. Thank you very much for calling. We appreciate it.
I just want to thank Derek for the call, but just to agree with him completely that, and it's one of the reasons why I got out of politics altogether. I never liked, former prosecutors are very bad at raising money, and I never
Which
really liked.
Which you were, by the way, for those who don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Bad at raising money, or
no,
former
I don't know about that.
Still bad at raising money.
Prosecutor, yeah.
Yeah. I never liked it, but what you have to do, and it gets exponentially worse if you elevate it to how much time people in Congress spend raising money versus actually doing the people's work. It's absolutely horrible. But the amount of time you have to spend to raise money, where you have to raise it from, I know. And people always say whenever there's an article about somebody taking money from someone that the media or the public think presents a conflict of interest, the quote is, the trick is, or what you're supposed to do is be able to accept the donation, but not be beholden to them. It's that second part that people increasingly have trouble with. And the more money that is needed to run for office now, the more people are beholden to certain interests. And it's just awful. I mean, since Citizens United, it's just become a totally different ballgame.
We have a text from somebody from Washington, D.C. His name is Clarence. He says he's fine with the conflict. 877-301-8097. Well, at least I was amused.
I was actually looking for that text.
Even if no one else was. Thank you very much, Jim. Mary in the car, I think you're going to finish things off here. Thanks for the call. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent.
Hi, Mary.
What's up?
Great. So I don't understand why the burden would fall on a private individual. I have a rental that I'm reliant upon the rent from, and I'm a senior, and I think the only person that I should be obligated to subsidize is the person I gave birth to, not a stranger.
How many units do you have?
2 and it's owner occupied.
Well, I want you to know, Mary,
So,
if you, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you owned that property in Boston, you would not be subject to the rent control law. Certain number of units. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I understand that, but the premise is still the same. Like, how can it fall on a private citizen to have to subsidize strangers?
Well, Mary, do you, if I may, respectfully, taxation is subsidizing strangers. Wealthy people are supposed to pay more so that Mary, you raised the point, I'll say it, and you have all the time to respond. I know we're not supposed to say this because it gets people upset. It is a redistribution of wealth. The basic notion being that people can afford to pay more, subsidize services for those who can't afford it in the hopes that someday they too will be able to help people in need. So in my attitude, at least, rent control, if done fairly, as I think Mayor was proposed, is no different than how we fund all of government and what the basic purpose of government is, which is a Commonwealth kind of thing. Go ahead, though.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm disabled, and I'm low income, but I can't go to a supermarket and get everything 20% off.
Yeah.
I can't go to any other local little business and say, well, I need your help.
Are you on Medicare, Mary? Are you on Medicare?
Yeah, but that's different. That's funded by the government.
Why is it? Excuse me. Wait a second, Mary. That is a great one. My favorite. I went to a Sarah. Thank you for your call, by the way. It's funded by the government. There was a
funded by your taxes.
One of my favorite moments. Marjorie and I went with Michael Graham, our former colleague, a rather conservative soul, to a Sarah Palin rally on the Common many years ago because I wanted to see her in action. No, it was a pretty great event, I should say. The first sign I saw, a la Mary's point, you know what it said? I remember it to this day. Don't let government take over my Social Security.
Right.
I mean, it's just, it is unbelievable. That's funded by government.
Right.
Okay.
Also, there are, if you're a member of AARP, you get discounts on things. If you're a senior, you get discounts on things inside or outside of AARP. Subsidizing for people who can't afford it, to your point, is a regular thing that goes on. I would actually argue that is part of your obligation as a citizen and as a human being to, on occasion, maybe not always, look out for other people.
It's a nice notion. I agree. Could you do me a favor, Jamie, before the show's over? Could you reach out to Senator Feingold's office and ask him why he refused to comment for the Boston Globe and if he'd like to comment for us? That's it. Thank you for your calls and comments.
Thank you very much, everybody. After a quick break, we are going to be speaking with John Valverde. He's the CEO of YouthBuild USA. As always, you are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Hi, I'm Tibisay Zea, host of the podcast Salud, a show in Spanish about Latinos' health. Hay enfermedades bucales que pueden complicarse y afectar el resto del cuerpo. En el próximo episodio de Salud te explicamos por qué el sistema de salud oral en Estados Unidos es tan difícil de acceder para los latinos. Escúchalo este sábado a las 9:30 de la mañana por GBH. Listen tomorrow morning at 9:30 on GBH 89.7 o en tu plataforma de podcast favorita.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Prince Lobel, a full-service law firm anchored in Boston, committed to working hand in hand to provide a wide range of services on matters of local, regional, national, and international reach. princelobel.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrea Cabral is sitting in for Marjorie Egan. Yes, Marjorie will be back on Monday. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. The COVID-19 pandemic upended everybody's life, but perhaps none more than young people just starting to find their way in life. They wrested from their classrooms, lost jobs that served as lifelines to the community. Incidents involving police, students with weapons in schools are up in Boston this year, with summer right around the corner when, as you know, crime rates traditionally spike. We're joined now by John Valverde, CEO of the nonprofit YouthBuild USA. It's headquartered here in Roxbury. The organization targets at-risk youth, helping them reclaim their lives through career training and community building. John, it's great to see you again. Thanks so much for being here.
Same here.
John, it's really great to have you here. You call the youth that you work with opportunity youth, and I wanted to start with that because I used to cringe the entire time I was sheriff. When I was Secretary of Public Safety, we always called them at-risk youth, and I thought they're behind the eight ball just in the description.
I just did that, by the way. Do you know that?
That you just said at risk?
I just put them behind that same eight ball in my description. So
well, you should apologize profusely and never do it
again.
Thank
you.
I want you to first tell us a little bit about yourself, but tell us about YouthBuild and what's behind the calling them opportunity youth in terms of what this program actually does.
Sure. Again, my name is John Valverde. I've been president and CEO at YouthBuild USA for 6.5 years now. And I'm really grateful to be working in an organization that believes in second chances and, frankly, is providing real first chances in many instances for these young people. And Opportunity Youth, all of us talk about shifting the narrative and how important that is. And what a positive development to move away from at-risk or disconnected to humanize the young person in a different way. And we call them Opportunity Youth because if given the opportunity, they present an opportunity for our communities and the world.
John, what do you do for these young people?
YouthBuild is a comprehensive model. We support 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in school and not working. The vast majority have dropped out or been pushed out of school.
You know, often we talk to people who run organizations like yours who care deeply what they do but have no personal connection. You have a deep personal connection to these kinds of issues. Tomorrow, I believe, is the 15th anniversary of a pretty important moment in your life. Am I right? Is it tomorrow?
That's right. Tomorrow's Earth Day.
Well, it's not just Earth Day, my friend. What's at the 15th anniversary of, John Valverde?
Well, every Earth Day is the anniversary of my release from prison. When I was 21 years old, the average age of a young person in a YouthBuild program, I made a terrible decision that resulted in my incarceration. I was sentenced to 30 years in prison. I served a total of 16 years before I was released in 2008. And again, this is super personal to me. While I was incarcerated, I was able to access education, career training, leadership development, opportunities to serve and give back to the community. A prison is a community. And also the wraparound services and supports that anyone would need to manage through their trauma, heal, rebuild, and hopefully transform one's life. I just described the YouthBuild model. So although I'm not a graduate of YouthBuild, I believe my story is a YouthBuild story because YouthBuild is about second chances.
And people should know what kind of numbers you're talking about, the numbers of youth that are actually in need of programming like this, and how that has spiked and probably a lot to do with COVID and other things like that, and poverty, but how that has spiked. Give us an idea of the numbers that you're talking about, and I understand the service need, but the capacity to provide for so many.
Pre-pandemic, there were about 4.5 million young people aged 16 and 24 not working and not in school. Today, the estimates are double and as close as 10 million. For that. And YouthBuild is a global organization. We support 275 programs in 18 countries. There are 350 million young people aged 16 to 24 globally. And here in Boston and in Massachusetts, about 36,000 young people fit that category.
Do most people care about these young people, or do most of us say, well, that's those people. It's that neighborhood. It's those people's kids. Do we dismiss this, do you think?
You know, I don't think that. However, I will say most of the funding and attention goes through young people in the K through 12 system or in the post-secondary education system. We're talking about the young people that have fallen through the cracks of that, and YouthBuild stands with this important
Why
population.
should the non-carers care, other than being kind to fellow human beings who need a helping hand? Why should we all care about those opportunity use to 16 and 24-year-olds you serve?
Well, beyond the humanity point, when you pass over year after year, generation after generation, young people from specific communities, YouthBuild only works, I hate these labels, but in economically disadvantaged communities, marginalized communities, we are never, ever creating a world that works for enough people that we are shifting what is possible for our country.
And I used to say this all the time when I was sheriff, and people would say to me, but why should people care about inmates and pretrial detainees? Say they're getting out.
Yeah.
Right? That people are going to have lives after this. We don't keep people permanently in the middling system that sheriffs, or the county system that sheriffs oversee. You want the person next to you in the parking lot at the grocery store to offer to help you with your groceries, and not necessarily be looking to see how much your car might be worth to them. Now, I'm not in any way likening youth to inmates and pretrial detainees, but the caring for aspect. Our tendency is to be frightened by statistics around youth crime and say, put more police in schools. I know you have a completely different, incredible take on that. Why is that not the answer?
I think about the criminal justice or criminal legal system always in or you're still in the community, you're incarcerated, and then post-incarceration. I try to think of that whole spectrum. The supports we're creating in the community, the services are there. We have opportunities for young people to engage in different ways. I think what's before us is that we're not choosing to see, hear, and seek to understand young people, center them as the solutionaries they can be. And I think it's because we don't think of them as the leaders with the potential and power to transform the world today and in the future. But the other piece of it for me is you can lay the most powerful education, career training, leadership development program on top of the base of a traditional system without the respect, the dignity, the love that young people need to feel a sense of belonging and community. You can't reach them. And you know this probably better than anybody. As high as 95% of violent crime is rooted in a feeling of disrespect. When a young person does not feel seen or heard, when their voice doesn't matter, when their communities are full of crime and they feel the frustration and lack of hope that anything is possible for them, we see what we see. Hurt people hurt people.
And add trauma to that. Just
That's right.
Whether you feel ultimately disrespected or not, add the impact of trauma and the need to act out from that trauma when no one is listening to you.
That's right.
So John Valverde of YouthBuild, I have to say, you just used the word love. And one of your coworkers, when speaking to one of our producers, says love is a critical element of this. And I have to tell the truth, had I not been to the celebration of Mel King's life a week ago, where every single speaker said in the most convincing fashion, what I'll remember most about Mel is him saying, love is the question and the answer. And at the beginning, I was going, I don't need to hear this. And by the end, I was so convinced that this was central to the brilliance of Mel King's life. What does it mean to have love be a centerpiece of the work you and your colleagues do at YouthBuild?
You know, I think a lot of us think about criminal legal system and criminal justice, and we think about the role that guilt and shame has in a person's life that's committed a crime and that is working to rebuild their lives. The truth is, all human beings experience guilt and shame. All of us feel a sense of disrespect in many ways. All of us want to belong somewhere. And if you love someone first, you don't have to like them, but if you love someone first, They believe you care. If they believe you care, they open up and start to trust. If they can trust a little bit more, they start to share more openly. When you start to share more openly, you start to heal. You start to create spaces for communication and for community. Love has the power to achieve that.
It seems to me, not doing the wonderful work you and your colleagues do, that a lot of that is one-on-one stuff. And obviously you serve a large population, but there's a far larger population that isn't served because there's just not enough person power and enough money. So how do you replicate in a way that is affordable what you do, including love being a centerpiece, so that the full community that needs what you do gets it? You know what I mean?
You know, I had this dream when I first started, and it's still alive in me, that YouthBuild would be this anchor institution or program or physical brick and mortar space in every community that would have a symbol where a young person would know, if I go to this place, I will be treated with dignity and respect, and I will have an opportunity to rebuild my life. I believe that the only way forward to do this affordably is to think about the ecosystem that centers a young person as a learner, as a student, as a human being. It can't be just the elected official or just the religious institution or the community-based organization or YouthBuild. It has to be all of us collectively working together, believing in the power and potential of that young person.
But is that pipe dream? I mean, a regular guest on our show is Michael Curry, the head of the League of Community Health Centers, the NAACP. He has this huge health equity initiative up at the State House with dozens of other leaders of color in the healthcare community. He talks almost the same way you do, social determinants, it's got to be a broader kind of thing. Paul Revel, former Secretary of Education on our show, same deal. You got to worry about, is the kid safe going to school? Does he or she get decent nutrition in their household? Is this pipe dream stuff, even if you're right and Revel's right and Curry's right, is that real in this kind of political time?
I'll add one element that I believe makes it real. We talk about one-on-one work with a caring adult and a young person and the power in that relationship. What we don't talk about enough is the power of community. When young people who have failed repeatedly in the public education system cannot obtain employment, do not see themselves as capable of contributing to the world, how is it possible they go to a YouthBuild program and all of a sudden all of that is possible for them? Something is broken there, but what I wanted to say is, it's not just the adult with the young person, it's the young person with the fellow young person. That's the opportunity for us to transform communities in the world.
Talking to John Valverde from YouthBuild.
And part of that,
that's a rather
absolutely,
pathetic set of applause for a really important.
Because I started talking.
Thank you. That's a little bit better. Thank you.
Part of that, we're talking about feeling disrespected, is when you get them to the point where they feel as though they can be an inspiration for another kid. And that is how you build that one-on-one. But what concerns me is that we are seeing the generational impact of a couple of things. Sort of the disconnect of interpersonal interaction that's brought about by social media and a number of other things. And the fact that we have lost a lot of the programs that kids, I grew up being involved in all kinds of programs, and my mother was active in PTA, I was a Brownie, I was a Girl Scout, dance lessons, going ice skating, junior achievement, all of those kinds of things. A lot of those things have gone by the wayside, and that was where kids interacted with each other, they interacted with adults, more as authority figures, but that was sort of how we built each other up. We've lost all of that. And how are you dealing with the generational impact of kids coming to you even more disconnected based on all of these things than they ordinarily would have? Because we've always had kids that have not made it in school, that have dropped out, that have gotten into a little bit of trouble, become sort of unemployable. That's always been the case, but it's almost at an epidemic level.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about, and many have talked a lot about, the importance of centering young people as those closest to the problems are the ones closest to the solutions. And we put it on the young people, and we've had summits around this, and we collect them and do focus groups. Young people, maybe they do have the solutions. I choose to believe they do. Us adults in our generations, we probably created all the problems, so maybe we're not the ones that should be offering the solutions.
Or lecturing to them about how they're failing to meet our standards in the world.
John, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh, no, I interrupted you.
I was just going to end with centering the young person as having the solutions, but then us working to enact those solutions.
So you're meeting them where they are.
That's right.
We're talking to John Valverde, YouthBuild. First of all, what's the website, so we don't forget before you go, if people want to learn more?
Did I say
whatever?
enough W's?
Just what is
YouthBuild.org.
YouthBuild.org. You wrote a great piece in the Boston Globe about the clemency petitions that Charlie Baker did for Thomas Kuntz and William Allen, and you talk about it, about how we need comprehensive criminal justice reform. Interestingly, you wrote that after we got what the legislature called comprehensive criminal justice reform. So obviously, you feel there has to be more. One thing, we don't have a lot of time. One thing, a lot of people believe that the age of majority for purposes of the criminal justice system should be raised from 18 to 21 in Massachusetts. Should it, and why? Either way, why? Yes or no? What's the answer?
For me, I would raise it, and because we need to focus on Andrea's point of trauma. Trauma impacts whether you're 20 years old, physiologically, psychologically, or you're 15 or 14. And until we factor in on a case-by-case basis and really do the mitigation services that present the deciders with the information they need, we are not advancing justice.
Well, I know we're basically out of time. Almost. But I just wanted to add that I think what they're looking for is some sort of a carve-out for behavior that is so bad that you don't want to charge them as a juvenile, or the juvenile system doesn't have the capacity to deal with whatever this person is bringing, but it's doable. Raising that age is doable.
John, I not only want to thank you for being here, but I want to thank you for when I said at-risk youth, you're not looking at me and saying, how clueless is this guy?
I love you.
So kind of you.
Because I love you.
You do?
Yes.
You do? Then I love you too then.
That's it. That's the way forward.
Am I getting into this thing or not?
That's the way forward.
It's a start anyway. John,
right.
Your work is terrific. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure.
John Valverde.
Same here. Thank you.
We've been speaking with John Valverde, CEO of YouthBuild USA. For more information on the nonprofit's work, head to youthbuild.org. After the noon news, we'll be talking to Segun Otaluwo, the brand new host of the Boston Globe and NESN's new news show, Boston.
Do you want to play a Sun Ra tune instead?
More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Tools of the Mind, the research and play-based curriculum combines professional development and a comprehensive pre-K and K curriculum designed to build self-regulation skills. Learn more at toolsofthemind.org. Delve inside the mind of the great American poet Ruth Stone and watch her story unfold through archival footage, animation, and candid interviews. Catch Ruth Stone's vast library of the female mind, tonight at 8 on GBH.
So just come in there. You wouldn't play that. And you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, Boston, online, GBH News within
Eastern Time, which suggests that the justices intend to rule sometime before then. Becky Sullivan, NPR News.
The Pentagon says additional U.S. troops and equipment have been moved closer to Sudan to prepare for a possible evacuation of personnel from the U.S. Embassy. People living in the capital, Khartoum, continue to shelter in place amid ongoing fighting. Michael Copley reports others have fled Sudan.
According to the United Nations, as many as 20,000 people have fled into the neighboring country of Chad since the fighting began. Meanwhile, regional leaders have continued issuing calls for an end to the fighting.
Michael Koloki reporting more than 400 people have been killed in Sudan since fighting broke out nearly a week ago. Funeral services are starting in upstate New York for a woman who was fatally shot after, police say, the vehicle that she was in accidentally pulled into the wrong driveway. Jesse King with member station WAMC has more.
Kaylin Gillis and her friends were searching for a party in the rural Washington County town of Hebron when they mistakenly turned into the driveway of 65-year-old Kevin Monahan. Police say Monahan fired twice at the group, killing Gillis. Monahan is charged with second-degree murder. Friends and family will host a community gathering before Gillis' funeral in Schuylerville, New York. Her father, Andrew Gillis, spoke with reporters Wednesday.
If anything I'm thankful for is that I got to tell her that I love her before she walked out the door.
Monahan's lawyer says 3 vehicles pulled into his client's driveway, and Monahan was frightened when he pulled the trigger. For NPR News, I'm Jesse King in Albany, New York.
A 6th person has been arrested in connection with last weekend's mass shooting in Dadeville, Alabama. That attack claimed 4 lives. 32 people were injured. This is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell with the local stories we're following. The Coast Guard continues to search waters off Cape Ann for a 4th fisherman missing since their boat overturned yesterday on a fishing trip. Searchers recovered 3 unresponsive men from the water yesterday after the 17-foot boat overturned. Local fishermen say the men most likely found themselves in challenging conditions.
I've been on the ocean for 45 years, and there's nothing I could do in a small boat like that.
The reality is it's very dangerous to be out there in April in a small boat because you don't have the life rafts, you don't have survival suits. You can't survive in that temperature.
The Coast Guard tells GBH News a helicopter, an airplane, a couple of cutters, and small boats are all searching by air and sea. A medical examiner's van was parked outside the Coast Guard station in Gloucester last night as family and friends gathered nearby. Governor Maura Healey today replaced 3 members of the MBTA's board of directors, less than 2 weeks after the T's new general manager began his tenure. Healey brought former MBTA general manager Thomas Glenn, former state senator Thomas McGee, and commercial banker Eric Goodwine onto the board, removing 3 members appointed by former Governor Charlie Baker. Glenn will serve as chair. The Federal Transit Administration directed the T to take emergency action to protect work crews from unsafe conditions yesterday after a worker was hurt on the tracks. A busy night for Boston sports teams. The Bruins skate against the Panthers. The Celtics play the Hawks. The Red Sox play the Brewers. A mostly sunny Sunday, highs in the 50s. Clouds tonight, lows in the 40s. Then clouds and showers Saturday and Sunday, highs only in the 50s. It's 49 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Walton Family Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems to improve lives today and benefit future generations. More information at waltonfamilyfoundation.org.
And for more original reporting, visit gbhnews.org.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. Marjorie is off. She is back on Monday, sitting in as former Secretary of Public Safety of Massachusetts, Andrea Cabral. Hello again, Andrea.
Marjorie will be back when I let her out of my basement.
Oh, boy, that's a tough one.
Oh, I'm kind of having fun.
Yeah, you are?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think she's having fun in your basement. But in any case, we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Shagun Oduolowu. Is that close?
That was spot on.
Am I the man or am I the man?
I would expect nothing less from
exactly.
the intelligent minds of
That
public
would be
radio.
Shagun, by the way. Host of Boston Globe Today, which you can watch weeknights at 5 p.m. on Nessun, the Nessun 360 app, the Boston Globe app, and Globe.com. It started earlier this week. Congratulations. It's great to meet you, Shagun. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for the applause. I appreciate that. Yes, thank you. We've got a live audience. I love this. I feel like it's kind of on stage. This is perfect.
Not all of them are live, by the way, but some of them are, so just stay tuned, yes.
The ones with coffee are alive.
Yes. Yeah, got to get that cup of joe quickly.
So let me ask you, this is something sort of, Boston Globe today is brand new for the Globe, brand new partnership with another station, and brand new for you, this particular type of format. So start by telling us a little bit more about yourself. You bring a certain level of veterancy to this kind of work, and then tell us about the show.
So for me, look, I'm the child of immigrants who's literally living the American dream, right? I went to school for journalism, and I get to work at arguably the greatest institution of journalism in the country, right? So for my parents that get to see me on television, they're like, you did good, you did good, you did good. And then I get to use my degree, which is fabulous. My background in news, I've done hard news, I've done entertainment, I have done things and still continue to do things with CNN from time to time. They'll ask me to come in and talk about different topics. So when the Boston Globe calls, you pick up that phone, right? When they say we are going to do something that's never been done, you pick up that phone. The quote that I like to think of is, you can go somewhere and carry a torch, or you can go somewhere and light a torch. And I get the best of both worlds. Something new, I get to light that torch. We get to launch this show that'll do a second day lens of the news and the news that people are reading, that they're excited about, that's in the Boston Globe. But I also get to carry a torch and keep and continue the legacy of Pulitzer Prize winning type of journalism that the Globe is known for. So that's, like I said, I'm just living the American dream and happy to do it here in Boston, where America arguably was born.
Yeah, before we get to the show itself, you just moved here, right?
Yeah,
What are you thinking?
I'm about a month and a half in, right? I'm in Dorchester, so I commiserate with anyone who takes the T. I'm learning that the train system is something that not only do we write about. Yes, you leave early and try to figure, how to get about the city. The turns aren't all right angles, so I'm learning that as well. But
you sound like you're from Ohio or Indiana. You're a New York City and Los Angeles kid, right?
Well, to be fair, I grew up in Fairfax County, Virginia, like right outside Washington, D.C., school in Texas, then Los Angeles, and now here with a short little stint in New York. But I'm loving Boston. I'm loving the people. I'm loving the food. I'm loving the culture. Like, that's the one thing that I can't stress enough, that there's a culture here that as an outsider, you hear about it, right? You think Boston is going to be a certain way until you're in it. And then you're like, oh, this is not the Boston that, this is not the Boston that you hear about.
What did you hear about Boston? What's the certain way, my friend, that you had heard about Boston before you got here?
Goodwill Hunting and, the town, right? A lot of Sully from Southie. You expect that. I haven't gotten that, right?
Have you been to Dunkin' Donuts?
I mean, look, America, I'm the mayor at Dunkin'. So I love Dunkin'. It's amazing.
Shagun, tell us, for people I've seen several of the episodes this week. You're doing a terrific job.
Thank you.
Explain for people what the format of the show is and what they get. We understand, as you said before, it's to reflect in another medium the wonderful work the Globe does, but explain how that plays out.
So we are, if you can imagine, going to highlight the reporters that are covering and writing these stories. So one in particular that we ran, Barbara Lynch, who is a bit of an icon here in Boston, but has come under fire for toxic workplace environment. Janelle Nanos wrote an incredible piece that we led with, she did countless research. So I want to speak, and we get to speak with Janelle and ask her, what did you find? What are the people that worked there? What are they saying? And then we get to give the readers, we get to give the audience that watches the show just an in-depth look at what was happening, right? Like, you read an article, but you don't necessarily know the ins and the outs and the whys. And now we have the reporter that wrote the article explaining it with a second day lens. So you get to digest it a little bit better, and then we get to cover it and explain it.
Here's a little bit of your conversation with Janelle Nanos, where you're talking about whether the fallout will be clear cut. Here it is.
It's not. I mean, Lynch has been very open about her struggles with alcohol in the past, and I think she's also somebody who's lived through a lot of trauma. So, we know that she carries a lot with her, and I think that a lot of people who came forward said that they really hope that this inspires her to get some help. I think, a lot of people are worried for her and that she's pushed a lot of people away over the course of her career as well. And so I think she now, people are hoping that she can kind of come to a place where she can step up and do more for her staff to make them feel like they are protected.
By the way, we said we should follow up to yesterday. We mentioned that we've had Barbara on the show quite a few times, and we invited her yesterday after the Globe and New York Times piece were published, and she declined sending us the same statement that she sent to the media outlets.
We're talking to Segun Oduolowu, and I wanted to ask about the challenges. So,
Challenges for me or the show?
No, for the show.
Okay.
Sort of, because, younger people consume news differently than nearly everybody in every other age bracket. How are you sort of thinking to attract younger viewers, and how do you prioritize which of the Globe stories you're going to take a deeper dive in on a daily basis?
Well, first, Andrea, am I not young enough? Like, do I not appeal to the younger viewers? No, I felt that. No, see, that was the Boston that I was expecting. I understood your point.
I didn't mean that you weren't young, although I can absolutely see why you would.
Wait, I think she meant that I wasn't.
Yeah,
Let's continue, Segun.
No, what we do, first, you are absolutely correct. The way younger people consume news is different. They need it now and they need it immediate. That's why we're on Globe.com as well as the Nessun 360 app. So we are on your phone. We're not just on the screen in your living room, but you can take the show with you. But for the stories, it's what's compelling, right? We have reporters that run the age range, right? However this pendulum swings, we want the most dynamic story. So there's one that we did with a reporter, Diddy Copley, who is a young and up-and-coming, bright reporter, and it's about a Facebook group that young people are a part of, as well as, people of an advanced age, as you said that I am. I know what you implied. So we choose those. The
Facebook group was about the no-buy movement. You trade stuff. You barter stuff with your neighbors.
Right. The no-buy movement, and those are the type of stories that are generating interest, right? That people are talking about. The Barbara Lynch story is something that was on the front page that lots of news outlets are talking about. So we are very careful with our selection, right? But we also are not that typical news program where if it bleeds, it leads, right? We don't do sensationalism. That's not what the Globe has been about. The truth matters, integrity matters, and we want our journalists that are writing those stories that we know people are reading, regardless of age. And I think younger people are oftentimes looked at as they don't care enough, right? If it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen. Well, in our view, if we give you a good product, good is good, regardless of age.
And by the way, this is so true. I mean, that's why GBH is doing this digital first strategy, same thing, get the stories on your phone. I actually watch your first show. I'm not quite as young as you are on my phone in a car. By the way, I have to be honest with you, Segun. I resent two things about this show.
Oh, resent?
I resent, yes.
Well, let me stand
You want to take a note on
Okay.
this? One, I thought we were Boston Globe today. We have so many reporters here, and we focus on so many fabulous Globe stories that I think you sort of usurped our deal. That's number one.
Understood.
Number two, do you have the largest clothing budget in American history? Can you describe what you're wearing here? I mean, and I watch on the show. Right. You can really dress, my friend.
I appreciate that. That's also part to appeal to the younger viewers. But there's... it's not even much of a wardrobe budget. It's just I'm wearing what I think works, right? When you discuss the news, you want to look a certain way. For anyone out there that's...
I'm in a polo shirt that's ripped. What are you talking about?
But you're an institution.
That's because you don't care what works.
You could wear a hair shirt or a burlap sack. Like this man, we know him from anywhere.
Anywhere,
but for me, I always look at it, there's three letters. It's MMA. For anyone who's thinking about journalism in this realm, MMA, which is message, messenger, and audience. If I'm the messenger, will you buy the message coming from me if I'm in sweats or if I'm in a t-shirt. You may not. So I'm always very careful about how we appear and how we deliver the news, because they won't eat the meal. If I serve you a steak dinner on a trash can lid, it's still a steak dinner, but it's not as appealing. But if I serve it to you on fine china with a little bit of this and a little bit and a nice look, it's same steak dinner, but it's the way you appeal to your audience. And that's very crucial for a television show. The news matters, but also how they receive the news is also important.
I want you to know, not only was that not being critical, I am jealous. That was all out of jealousy.
No, I appreciate it.
And nothing else.
But speaking of Messenger, how are the reporters taking to this? Because we've seen, a lot of New York Times reporters, Washington Post reporters on national shows. You see them on MSNBC, you see them on CNN. Reporters generally are not in anonymity, but they're very careful about not making themselves part of the story. How do they feel about?
Are you kidding? This is a new era, my friend.
Well, I think that is absolutely true, but you still do have, Andrea Estes sort of comes to mind.
Andrea Estes, who's one of the great reporters of all time in the Boston Globe, we've invited her here maybe only 3,000 times through the years. She does not do other media.
She doesn't
That's her personal
That's right.
choice.
That's her thing.
Yeah.
And she's going to be the writer of some of the very stories that Boston Globe today is going to want to cover. How is it either dealing with that, or do you see reporters coming to that sort of willingly? And there's a second part to this very long-winded question. And do they at least see this as giving readers more insight into who they are and actually sort of building a following for their stories when readers can actually see them, talking about their stories?
I'll take your question backwards to front.
Okay.
So the first part is, if I do my job well as a host, then yes. Yes to the second part. They will see that we are trying to highlight their journalistic work, their writing, their stories, what they're bringing. So if I do my job well, if we at Boston Globe today, graphic-wise and story-wise and the way we edit, if we do our job well, then yes, the reporters will see that we are highlighting them, because that's our goal. But what we're finding is that yes, reporters can tend to be like, okay, what is this, you talking hairdo with all the outfits? This is not really journalism. But we aren't gotcha journalism. Like, we work, all of us, for the Globe. So because our job is to highlight them, we are not working just hand in hand. It is hand in glove. We are talking to the reporters about what can we tease out from your story? How do we highlight this salient point that if I read it, I might skip over? But with television, now we can show picture to it. Now we can give it a little bit more depth, right? So that a viewer, an audience member, can actually follow along with it. So we found diamonds in the rough. On the first show, we spoke with Hiawatha Bray, who, if you meet him, you would not think that when I put him on that TV desk, he is fantastic. And we were talking about password managers, which might seem to many to be boring, but Hiawatha brought it to life. And it was like, I'm Abbott and Costello, and I'm just sitting there as a straight man, letting him take the whole interview over. And you wouldn't think a journalistic writing reporter would be this great on TV. We are finding that when they see the set, when they get to sit with me and realize that I'm not going to spring questions on them that they're not expecting, that we are all in the same family to highlight the dynamic way the Globe brings out the news, that they can't wait. They're taking to it like a duck boat to water.
Here is, by the way, your conversation with Hiawatha Bray, the great tech writer, longtime tech writer for the Globe. Here is Hiawatha and Shagun.
Like, I'm just a single person. Who's hacking me?
They're hacking the LastPass. The whole reason they got hacked was because they attacked one guy who worked at the company and broke into his computer.
But they wanted to get to the company. I feel like if I put my stuff into the cloud and I load this stuff to these password managers, am I not just drawing a bigger target for the hackers?
In some respects, yes, but if these companies are running their security reasonably well, they are going to be much harder to attack.
That was Hiawatha Bray crushing Shagun like a bug on the... I want to add something to your analysis, which I totally agree with in terms of having the reporter who's done the work. I think one of our goals, what we all do, is to work as hard as we can, not only to do high-quality work, but to work to get it out to as many busy people as we possibly can. bringing the wonderful reporting the Globe does to another medium in and of itself is a huge step in a right direction. The Globe being generous enough to allow their reporters and columnists to come here, I hope they consider it to be a generous step. Linda Henry has been very kind to us, and Brian McGrory before, Nancy Barnes now, etc. The second thing is, I think it's really important for viewers, consumers of news, readers, to have the reporters and columnists humanized for them. I don't mean as becoming stars. I mean, that's sort of what you were talking about a minute ago.
Yeah.
I don't like that either. I don't like when reporters from the New York Times are tweeting opinions when they're factual reporters, which I think creates great discomfort as to whether or not they can be fair. But when you see the individual who's done the work, I think it brings you much closer to the story and to the news outlet to begin with. So I think there's huge value there too. You buying that or
no?
not?
I agree. I agree 100%. There was a movie out there, Meet Joe Black, with Sir Anthony Hopkins and Brad Pitt, and he's a newspaper man. He's a media mogul, and he said, all I wanted to do was give you the truth unvarnished. I just give you the truth and let you, the audience, respect your intelligence on digesting the truth. Opinion, everyone is doing that. You can turn on a TV and you can get people talking in a silo. You can get opinion over here. The Boston Globe today, we're giving you the facts that the reporters have researched intensively, right? If it makes it to print, it's been fact checked. We're not saying, you know what, we think this is going. No, these are facts. And now when those reporters talk about these facts, they give them life. So you know where the facts come from. And then we let you, the audience, this intelligent Boston, New England audience, digest the truth.
Yeah, I don't mean to obsess on this, but you think when you're done with that shirt, you could hand it down to me?
I'm happy to.
We're sort of the same size.
No, we've got this. I feel it's like looking in a mirror.
Exactly. That's what I think a lot of people
I would pay $1,000 to see him in that shirt.
Okay.
I absolutely
Thank you
would.
for that, Andrea. Shagun, on Fridays, you're not going to be there. The great Chris Gasper, a great sports guy. Tell us what Friday night's going to be like.
So Boston Globe Today Sports will be hosted by one of the Boston Globe's very own sports writers, Chris Gasper, and he will bring just what's going to happen over the weekend in Boston sports. So if it's the Red Sox, the Bruins, the Patriots, the Celtics, what's happening in Boston. It'll be a Friday show, so you'll get me Monday through Thursday, and on those rare occasions that Chris can't do it, I'll step in. But it's a sports show with a guy that is from Boston. Chris was born here, went to school here, knows Boston through and through, loves it here, is known here among the sports culture, and is going to be interviewing and talking to his fellow ink-stained brethren of writers and columnists of the Boston Globe. So you're going to get sports in a completely different manner, with not just talking heads, but people that, go on the road with those teams, that are reporters that cover those breaking stories of what I have found to be the lifeblood of Boston, which is its sports culture.
I can absolutely tell that you used to be an English teacher. It's really apparent.
Wait, were you an English teacher?
Yeah.
A long time ago in another life, I taught 8th grade English.
That's
Why would I make that up?
AP 8th grade English, right?
But is Chris Gasper and the Fridays, that must be part of the partnership with NESN, right?
Well, we're all part of NESN. So as Jim mentioned, like Linda Henry, the great Linda Henry, who I am absolutely in awe of. This is a partnership.
You better be.
Well, again, it's always good to get on the boss's good side. But NESN, as we know, is owned by Jim Henry.
Right.
John
the
Henry.
the Boston Globe Media Group. That's right.
So you've got John Henry and NESN, and then you've got Linda Henry, the CEO of the Boston Globe. And so we air there, and everyone needs content. Everyone needs good content. So Monday through Thursday, it'll be me, and then on Fridays, Chris will provide even better, I guess, sports content. So it'll be fantastic.
Shagun, before you go, by the way, we're really both. I know I speak, but we're really glad to meet you. And by the way, I think this is great. I think the more opportunities people have to hear high quality news through credible voices, the better this community is. So I think it's great. This thing launched. Are you nervous? I mean, I know you've done a lot of stuff. It's a totally new
nervous
deal.
here with
no,
you?
No,
nervous doing the show.
Are you nervous that you've done it for 1 week? I mean, it's a high stakes thing. Obviously, the Globe's a big deal in this community.
And we could be rough critics. I mean, that's the other thing that happens in New England is we're unsparing if we decide to criticize something.
So?
I played college sports, and I prefer when a coach tells me that was no good, right? You take the shot, you make the shot. If you miss the shot, we shoot it again. So part of me being here, I don't think if you love, care, or invested in anything and you're not nervous, it's not worth something to you. This matters to me because yes, it's my face, but my face is representing an institution that arguably is the platinum standard when it comes to reporting news. So yes, I am nervous, not that the show is not going to do well, but that I won't do well for the show. Because this is the Henry's dream. They entrust me to be the face of it. So and the city has embraced me, so I want to do the best job possible, and I think we're going to. And when we don't, we have the ability to pivot, to turn, to make it better, so we listen to the audience.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. So you start with a particular format, but it's a brand new show. Is it wide open as you go along, as you get feedback on the show, the ability to tweak, the ability to change the format? Do you feel as though you're going to have the ability to customize it, basically?
Absolutely customize to make better, right? There's integrity that we will keep and formats that we won't change, but to make better, we will see how audiences receive the stories that we choose. We will see how audience like the way the set looks. They may, they might say like Jim did that, you know what, why is this guy wearing so many outfits? I want him in a plain t-shirt or a polo, and we're just gonna keep it.
I didn't say that. I said I wanted the outfit is what I said, but go ahead.
No, but we will listen to what makes sense to do our very best. And I think that is all you can ask from a media company, is to respect who's consuming it, right? It's like if you're a chef and you make a plate and you hand it to the customer and the customer says, I don't like this. If you're at a good restaurant, they take the plate back and say, what can we change to fit your palate? With us, if the audience says we don't like something or this needs to change, we will go back and see if it's possible to do it. Does it make sense to do it? But at the end of the day, putting out a great product is what the Boston Globe today wants to do.
Before you go, I know you haven't asked me for advice, but I'm going to give you some on the way out. You were talking about that coach who was critical of you and how you deal with it. You want to hear that? Let me tell you, my approach is a little different. Okay. The coach who is critical of me, how I deal with that? He's never invited back on the show. So that is another way you can possibly approach that, Shagun. So consider that, will you please?
I will. I will challenge it only with the Nick Saban quote that I quotes and stuff. So for the audience, I do like quotes because there's many people smarter than me. But the Nick Saban quote that I use for TV is, we don't practice to get it right. We practice so we never get it wrong.
Jesus.
That's the way we look at it.
Shagun, as we say in Massachusetts, good luck to you and the Boston Red Sox.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much. Jim, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thrilling to have you here.
Thank you, audience out there. Watch us show 5 o'clock on Nesson 5 days a week, 5 at 5.
We've been speaking with Shagun I'm gonna do it wrong. Shagun Oduolowu.
You didn't do it wrong.
That's right. All right. Host of Boston Globe Today, which you can watch weeknights, as he said, at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on NESN, the Nesson 360 app. It's also on the Boston Globe app, and it's on bostonglobe.com, or just globe.com. After a quick break, the BAA is apologizing for racist
It's Coachella season, and of course, Bad Bunny is headlining. He just dropped a single with the band Grupo Frontera.
mmskylights.com, and Unicare, a health partner for Massachusetts Group Insurance Commission members. Unicare is committed to providing health plans and benefits that can fit your life. Annual enrollment ends May 5th. Learn more at unicaremass.com.
Welcome back to, there I am. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. Andrea Cabral is sitting in for Marjorie Egan, who's back on Monday. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. Now joining us is another person who dresses better than I do, Sue O'Connell. She's here to take on the social norms and abnormalities of the day. Media maven Sue O'Connell, that is. She's the co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, contributor to Current on NBCLX and NECN. Hello, Sue O'Connell.
You know, Jim, we're about the same size. So if you want to change jackets, we can try that.
Very, very kind. Thank you.
Good day, good day, good day.
And to you.
Hello, Sue.
Hello.
So
Andrea
I have to
Cabral.
say, when I saw this story yesterday, I just literally laughed out loud because sometimes there's a perfect confluence of karma where someone so deserving gets what's coming to them. Talk about the fact that Mike Lindell, who well, I guess you could get. Well, it's been a bad week. It's been a bad week for liars generally. When you kind of look at the overall news, bad week for conspiracy theorists. And in terms of Mike Lindell, it's really a bad week for tweaker pillow salesmen. And I say that very seriously because I think that's what he is. But how did it come that Mike Lindell, formerly given carte blanche entree to the White House, may now have to pay $5 million to just a regular person?
So let's just say, Andrea, that I come up with some wackadoodle theory, right? Like I think that the green monster is actually not green, it's purple. And then I go on your show and I say, prove Sue wrong, and there's $5 million for it if you prove me wrong. And then I have a contract. I actually have a written legal contract that says if you want to try and prove me wrong, Jim Browdy, you're going to get $5 million. And then, of course, you can't prove me right? Because I'm
the green
wrong.
monster's green,
Green
right.
monster's green. There's no way to do it. And then you actually want to collect your money, and you've signed a contract. It's not like I was on the air fooling around, or I could say it was entertainment or satire. And then you go to court to sue me. I'm going to end up having to pay you. And that's what happened to Mr. Pillow, my pillow man. He went on and said, prove me wrong about the conspiracy that the election was stolen, that the machines were not working correctly. And a data scientist and expert, whose name is Robert Zeidman, I believe, is expecting a $5 million payout because he was able to prove, in fact, that there was no election fraud. And this is in front of a court. This is, as Pillow Boy said, it's going to go to court. It is indeed. And I don't know if he has the $5 million. You know how these guys often are, saying they're bankrupt. But, he's
got a bunch of other suits, defamation suits that have named him. So he's...
Including Dominion, right?
He's in the Dominion suit.
He is in the Dominion.
And so he's spending like millions and millions just on legal fees. But it was about the quality, the part that really made me laugh were the comments about the quality of the data. He puts up this big $5 million challenge, and tell people what the actual quality of the data was.
Hold on, I have to see. You go ahead, because you actually are more dug into this.
Well, basically, it's described even in the.
Right.
It is nonsensical, not even having anything to do.
It's just made up stuff.
It's right.
Yeah, you threw me off with the data that things have come into the machines, that things have changed it, and there's
It's not actual data.
This guy's a scientist, a data expert. It's not just somebody who thinks and can prove with science, with examination, that the voting machines worked the way they were supposed to.
Here is the guy himself, the researcher, Robert Zeidman, who hopefully is going to get the $5 million bucks. Here's what he had to say about the analysis.
I never expected to be able to show that it was bogus data, because normally data analysis could take weeks or months, and I had 3 days.
Right.
But the data was so obviously fake that I spent a few hours before I could show it was fake.
Let me be clear, by the way, about its fakeness. At least from what I read, Zeidman's conclusion is the data wasn't even for November of 2020. Not only did it not prove there was fraud in the election, the data he was allegedly relying upon, he being Mr. Pillow, wasn't even about November of 2020.
No, and all he had to do was prove that data was wrong. I mean, I can't. It just blows my mind. I mean, who would do this?
It's one of the biggest self-owns of modern times. And let's listen to this second clip. This is a clip of the Pillow Boy, as you call it, My Pillow CEO Mike Lindell, issuing the challenge. He was I've actually seen a clip. He was very proud of it. Here's the clip.
there's a $5 million prize for anybody that can prove the election data that I have from the 2020 election is false.
Okay, well, that's the end of that.
And then he says in the deposition that he didn't think anybody would actually do it.
Well,
that's
enough for me.
the kicker for me.
You know,
so
can
I'm making this up. I'm going to offer someone $5 million. They're going to sign a contract, and then I'm going to be shocked that I have to pay $5 million.
Okay, so let's do the following. Let's stay. I like when there's seamlessness. Let's stay on some of the dumbest people on earth.
Okay.
We'll go from Mr. Pillow to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here is the Congresswoman questioning at a hearing the head of Homeland Security for Joe Biden, Secretary Mayorkas.
China is poisoning America's children, poisoning our teenagers, poisoning our young people. How long are you going to let this go on?
Congresswoman, let me assure you that we're not letting it go on. We are fighting this.
No, I reclaim my time. You're a liar. You are letting this go on, and the numbers prove it.
Well, the liar thing did not make the Republican chair of the committee. That would be Mark Green from Tennessee, very happy. Here's an unrepentant Marjorie Taylor Greene being chastised by, again, a leader of her own party, that committee chair. Here it is.
Chair asks the gentlelady if she wishes to seek unanimous consent to modify or withdraw her remarks.
I will not withdraw my remarks because the facts show the proof.
So in making a ruling on this, it's pretty clear that the rules state you can't impugn someone's character. Identifying or calling someone a liar is unacceptable in this committee.
And then what happened, which I have almost never heard of before in this kind of setting, a person of the same party, the chair of the committee, said she could no longer say anything at the hearing. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary.
So the reason they're reacting like that, the Republicans, is not because what she's saying is outrageous. It's not because she's Marjorie Taylor Greene and there's obviously something wrong with her. It's because it's hurting their message, right? I think that she is so extreme in terms of what she's doing that where they, I think, had an opportunity, they believe they had an opportunity to forward their message about border security, whether you agree with their message or don't agree with their message. They're trying to craft a message that they're going to have for their presidential campaign. Right? And it can't be a wackadoodle crazy message. You can't have a bomb thrower out there when your side is trying to manage what the message is going to be. So again, it's not what she said. It's not that she called,
Mayorkas
a liar. It's not that she's not following the rules of what the committee have set. It's that she's not taking the marching orders to follow the steps. I guarantee she's going to be primaried. I guarantee that they are right now looking for a Republican to primary her.
She is very popular.
Well,
in that district, as we learned on 60 Minutes.
They can't manage her, and she's going to hurt the party in the general election. I mean, we can talk about the primary and the QAnon folks and the Trump believers, but if she's out there, if they have a moderate Republican candidate, it probably won't happen, but say they do, she's going to be out there causing problems in the general election.
Then they must be planning on using the rule that Kevin McCarthy sort of grudgingly agreed to in order to be elected speaker and getting rid of him as well because he's her guardian angel.
Right. I mean, it's a very precarious. All of the Congress is very precarious down there. There's
and he can be removed by what? One vote.
One vote.
So he agreed to that in order to become speaker. I think they must be getting ready to give him the boot because he empowers her.
Right.
They can't do this too many more times with him as speaker.
She's there because of him.
Right.
She's sitting on that committee because of McCarthy.
We're going to get to the abortion decision that arguably is going to come down today from the Supreme Court unless they extend the deadline, which is midnight tonight on the abortion medication, mifepristone. But we just thought of when you mentioned Green and sort of being an outlier. You've heard what Nancy Mace from South Carolina said in the last 24 hours. This is a Republican who identifies herself as anti-choice, who basically said yesterday in front of virtually every media and on CNN a couple of days ago, if my party, the Republican Party, does not moderate its position on guns and abortion, we're going to get destroyed in the 2024 election.
They don't care, though. They don't care. I mean, Jim, years ago on this show. Yes, years ago, I was on with a Republican conservative, not an elected official.
Who was that?
I want to check my facts before I make sure. But he said to me, I said, if you're coming after marriage equality, why don't you go after divorce? Divorce is a bigger problem.
Yep.
And he said to me in the green room, oh, we want to go after divorce, and we want to go after birth control, and we want to go after abortion, and that's what the plan is here for these Republicans and these conservatives. You know, abortion, reproductive rights, access to abortion, medical abortion pills. Now, one of these abortion pills is actually a medication for ulcers. I mean, that's the origin of where this pill came from. So once they're allowed to do that, they're going to be able to move, if they're allowed to do that, to go to birth control pills, and then they're going to be able to work on legal divorce. And this whole section of the Republican Party is what's doing it. And then meanwhile, you have these quote-unquote normal Republicans who want to talk about fiscal responsibility and shrinking government. And I just don't know where the Republican Party goes.
Well, I have to say, I ordinarily would agree with you, but let's talk about abnormal Republicans for a minute. Ron DeSantis is going around the country talking about his book and pre-announcement. And I think it was in the Drudge Report, a link to a story the other day, talking about in front of a group, one of whose key issues is choice or being anti-choice. He never mentioned what his legislature just did about lowering the number of weeks after which you cannot.
He was in New Hampshire and didn't mention it.
Okay, so that would suggest to me that even radical rightists in his own party get Nancy Mace's message.
Right, but he's
we
running
can't
for
win an election.
Right, but he's thinking about running for president.
Right. Correct.
Right. So he's.
Oh, you mean in state races?
I mean, just
okay.
down.
Okay.
He's
okay.
He knows he can't be president, and he keeps talking about this Florida miracle, this Florida idea. I mean, meanwhile, he's trying to, I think jokingly build a prison around Disney, which any of us who have been there, as you know, I've been there 5 times in 20 years.
We know that.
Some people think it's a prison already in Disney, especially when my brother used to call Mickey Mouse Mickey Capone, because you always have to leave through the gift shop and they steal your money that way. So,
that's pretty good.
it's. I think DeSantis is an example of what this split is.
But I've been saying this for a long time. Most parties feel like they have to grow the party and be more inclusive in order to stay alive. Right. The Republican Party has made a clear choice that is not necessary, and they are very strictly focused on their base. Do you think they can achieve, when you say they don't care, they still want to remain in power? Do you think they think they can achieve that with gerrymandering?
No.
And the sort of the perfection of minority rule? Because otherwise, they will die out.
I think that there is a religious Christian white supremacist core to some of these beliefs, and they're not necessarily caring if they win elections.
Yeah, there absolutely is.
So they want to win elections to have the power. They want to win elections to use the power, but they don't necessarily care if you disagree or agree with them because they've got the religious, moral high authority.
But can I cite another example where I disagree with you? Is those same white evangelicals who care deeply about things like being anti-abortion, support wholeheartedly a man like Donald Trump, who is antithetical to every single thing whose behavior is antithetical.
But it's the message, not the messenger. That's what I was saying yesterday.
He reversed Roe v. Wade.
You're right.
It could be the Antichrist.
You're going to have to do better if you want this jacket.
Done. Well, if the Antichrist did what Trump did, they'd vote for him. That's absolutely true. It's not the message. It's not the messenger. It's the message. That's absolutely true.
We're talking to Sue O'Connell.
Yes, I'm sorry. I meant to say that we're talking to Sue O'Connell.
Well, we are talking to Sue O'Connell. Sue O'Connell.
What do you think SCOTUS is going to do, and what time do you think they're going to issue this decision on a Friday?
Midnight. I don't know what they're going to do because I mean, no one ever knows what they're going to do except when they leak what they're going to do.
Exactly.
Right.
I think that the FDA portion of this is a big. I mean, it's stupid to say.
Jim definitely agrees with you.
I had Chuck Todd on yesterday.
Yeah,
from
what
Meet
did
the
Chuck
Press.
say?
Let me quote myself, my favorite political thinker.
Well, I quoted myself earlier.
That as much as they have no respect for the rights of women in this country, the only thing that outweighs this is their respect for the pharmaceutical industry. And the notion that this will cause for people who don't understand this, the concern among the big pharma is we get a drug, we spend $16 trillion to develop a drug, we get it approved by the FDA, and then 20 years later, an administration that doesn't agree with the politics of the drug, a la Krozik, or what was his name?
Kaczmarek.
Kaczmarek, thank you, in Texas, the single federal district court judge, overturns, and essentially everything we created is destroyed. So if they have to choose between supporting the pharmaceutical industry or continuing to gnaw away at the basic fundamental rights of women, as much as the latter matters, I think big business matters more.
I agree with that, and I also think that people understand how important the FDA is to keeping us safe and from dying from things that people make. I mean, the reason the FDA was created was because a medicine manufacturer put an ingredient in the medicine for children which actually killed them. And people went to the government and say, how could this happen? They didn't test it. They put it in here. So I think the big business aspect of pharma and the fact that I think we all know the FDA does a pretty good job keeping us safe. And if they start rolling, if we give a judge who doesn't have, just a judge, the ability to roll back FDA approvals without some sort of due process.
With a bad decision that flew in the face of their own precedent. I agree with you, Jim.
I just don't think so.
But I think they do it on the standing issue, so they don't have to blatantly say we're for. The standing issue is real, though.
Yeah.
They don't have to blatantly say this is because we don't want to, we'd like to continue to oppress women, but we really, really like the pharmaceutical
We're going to wait for a
company.
better chance to oppress us.
And that's what I think the dissenters' opinions are going to say. I think that's part of the reason for the delay. I think the dissenters or concurrers or whatever they might be are giving themselves more time to write decisions that set out a roadmap for the next case to accomplish what they want without hurting an industry they love.
Agree.
Having said that, all three of us are probably wrong, and they're probably going to screw everybody with a 6-3 decision.
Right. I stand ready to eat my
11:15.
words by Saturday morning.
Talking to Sue O'Connell. Sue, the BAA, the marathon, the finish line about, 50 yards from where, or you're supposed to say 50 meters from where we are. The race itself is pretty terrific. Some of the great stories were great stories. The story the day after, particularly coming out of Newton, was not such a great story. You want to share that with people?
Yeah, and this is a story that had a lot of knee-jerk reactions to a lot of people. So I think it's important to kind of go through the TikTok a little bit of it. Listen, this was a big security event. Last Friday when I was trying to get in here, I actually ended up breaching security over there, and I got yelled at, and I got pushed back. Yeah, I was, me like, ooh. So there was a lot of security due to it being the anniversary of the bombing. Understood. The BAA interacts with a number of police departments all across the route. Understood. There are rules about interacting with the runners that are longstanding, and I think were heightened this year due to the security issues. Everyone breaks those rules.
That's right.
Everybody breaks those rules. If you have stood along any part of the route, you see people giving people high fives, cheering people on, people stopping to get an ice cream or a drink from someone that they knew was going to be standing there. The issue here is that one of the groups of color, there are a number of groups of color that were running, their supporters, as they made their way along the route to give high fives and cheer on and do the stuff, they were interacted with, they believe, by the Newton Police Department in a way that they felt had singled them out, and of course signaled them out because they were people of color cheering on runners of color. The Newton Police Department has said we got multiple calls from people concerned about the interactions. The BAA says we will do better.
Well, people, including the BAA itself, making those calls.
Right, that we see that there are challenges here. And someone I was talking to about this who was just saying, listen, this is an overreaction. There was a lot of security. The issue is, why were there more calls for people interacting with people on the route? If it was a group of white, nice ladies interacting, no one would have called the police on them. If it was a group of elderly white gentlemen interacting, nobody would. But because it was a boisterous, celebratory group of African American, black and brown people interacting, I think, in my opinion, that made more calls happen to the police. So this is an opportunity for us not to just say, oh, it was high security, that happens all the time. It's why are people calling the police? Why were people concerned? And to the BAA's point, let's do a better job of keeping that in mind.
So a couple of things, full disclosure, I'm friendly with John Carmichael, who's the Newton police chief. I actually think, very highly of him. Well, we work together on all the cannabis stuff with the Cannabis Advisory Board. But I think, Sue, you're spot on. It was both the credibility that those calls engendered immediately which makes me I think it's the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, has FOIA'd. They want to know what was
Freedom
in
of
those
Information
calls
Act.
because it will be interesting to see whether or not the race of the people who were being complained of was mentioned. And it's the guy in Central Park who's bird watching, and there's there's suddenly a call that he's assaulting a woman. They follow in a pattern, so it is about how those calls were responded to, how much credibility they were given by the people who heard them. And it is true, Jim, the BAA is the one that passed those calls on. So there was no sort of screening process. But I will say this, I saw Mike Remy's video. That was I think he was the first one to...
He was one of the
and he's the pioneers, right? The pioneers running through.
Before you say that, let's hear from him. We have a little bit of sound from him. Here he is from the Pioneers Run crew, captured footage of excessive policing around that cheer zone, which consisted of 2 diverse running groups. Here's a clip from the video that
we just try to support. I know it's mile 21. I'd like to high five. I guess we can't cheer no more because I know people love to say we exaggerate, and I don't even know what the presence is all about. They love to say we it's all in your head. You're making it up. Make this up though. Can't make that up.
Sorry, that was
and
Mike
he was,
Remy.
as he was saying that, he was panning, and it was a phalanx,
of police officers
with their bicycles. So
Right.
their bicycles, as metal, were in front of them along the line, and their bodies were behind. The police officer's body was behind the bicycle, and it was a very, very long line. And the other thing to mention is, these groups have been coming for 5 years and doing the same sort of cheering.
With no calls.
They sort of have a cookout in the back. They play music. This is how they get their people over the finish line. And it's at Heartbreak Hill for a reason. That's a really tough place for people to get over. They've been doing it for 5 years, and this has never happened before. So this is new.
And to your point, if the calls say there's a bunch of kids who are interacting and keep coming up, then there was no problem.
Right.
But if it says, there's this black guy that keeps coming up and trying to give other black people a high five, I'm exaggerating to make a point, but that's the issue. And like, what motivates you? This is the white people, confession moment time, right? I have always said to the kids in my life, the children, prior till about 5 years ago, if you are worried, call 911. If you're worried about something, call 911. And now I say to them, before you call 911, take a moment and think, why am I feeling this way? And I'm not saying if you're in major danger, but we need to do some self-reflection.
Okay, we only have 30 seconds left. Before you go, only because I have a short memory. I know we've had this discussion many times. I just don't remember the content. A handful of years ago, I was at Disney World, and it was maybe the single worst place I've ever been in my life, other than Las Vegas. You have been there 5 times with Ruby, your kid. In 30 seconds or less, explain to me what you find appealing about Disney, whatever it is, world.
It is all very organized. When they have a parade, it's set up and goes away. You didn't even know it was there. You drop something on the floor, it gets picked up. And it's just, they're all kind of like hostage situations, but they're so friendly. They are so friendly and so nice to you and so helpful.
So there's never a moment while you're there when you say to yourself in a moment of honesty, this is the worst place I've ever been.
I have paid thousands of dollars to go to Disney by choice.
All right, enough of you.
Look at Andrew Cabral is losing respect for me as we sit here. I was just all the way up here a minute ago.
I've never been there.
It's like
I know lots of people.
waterboarded.
I have to say, this is the rare moment. I agree with Jim on Disneyland and Las Vegas.
Brutal.
Oh, well, I love Las Vegas too.
Great, goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks for applauding to save me. It's okay.
I think they're applauding for me rather than Sue. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Sue.
Goodbye, Sue O'Connell.
Media
Nice to see
maven
you.
Sue O'Connell is the co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News and contributor to Current on NBC, LX, and NECN. Sue, thanks again for joining us, and you can go to Disney World now. After a quick break, tomorrow is Earth Day. To commemorate, we're checking in with Bonnie Heupel, the new commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Don't go away. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
President Biden has a new Democratic challenger, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., famous for his family but infamous for spreading anti-vaccine disinformation. I'm Adam Riley. This week on Talking Politics, we'll ask how and how much the media should cover Kennedy and other fringe candidates. Plus, online sports betting's fast start could prompt increased scrutiny of the new industry. Join me for Talking Politics tonight at 7 on GBH2 and online at gbhnews.org.
Funding for our programs comes from you and The Lyric Stage, presenting Sister Act, and Then There Were Nuns, a divine feel-good musical comedy, now through May 14th at the Lyric Stage Theater in Boston. Tickets at lyricstage.com. And Prince Lobel, dedicated to collaborating with you and the causes you care about. Their legal professionals are committed to delivering legal services that help the disadvantaged and promote the public interest. PrinceLobel.com.
Next time on The World, Brazil claims to be neutral on the war in Ukraine, supporting neither Moscow nor Kyiv. But this week, Brazilian authorities suggested that countries that provide weapons to Ukraine, like the U.S., are prolonging the fighting. The White House was having none of that.
What we heard, the tone was not neutral, and it is not true.
Pressure from Brazil to end the war. It's on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Trusted, local, news. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy. Marjorie Egan has a day off. She's back on Monday. Andrew Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety for the Commonwealth, is sitting in. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming as always at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. As Andrea said, Earth Day is tomorrow, time when we're supposed to celebrate the environment, maybe think about ways to protect it. For someone like Bonnie Heipel, it's her job to do that every day. Heipel is the new commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, just appointed by the governor last month. Previously, she worked for over a decade as an environmental lawyer in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York. Commissioner, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Congratulations. It's very nice to meet you. I used to be in the governor's cabinet. It is no small thing to be part of the larger secretariat. And to that point, you have a pretty unique resume for a DEP commissioner. I'm not at all sure that we've ever had a DEP commissioner who was a lawyer, let alone an environmental lawyer. But the other part is that, while there was some environmental government service, I think, in your background a while ago, you come from the other side of the regulatory lens. So tell the folks who are listening and watching a little bit about yourself and what that experience, what impact you think that experience is going to have as you begin as commissioner?
Sure. So I am a lawyer by training. I practiced as an energy and environmental attorney for about 15 years. Really running the gamut in terms of what that meant. So litigation, a lot of renewable energy project development, and compliance advice. So assisting companies as they're trying to make sense of often very complicated environmental laws at both the state and federal level, put those together and make sure that their programs and their operations were meeting those standards and exceeding them.
Can you, almost every month that we've had Governor Healy here, but, well, I shouldn't say not just Governor Healy, but candidate Healy, when she was the Attorney General, she talked about how important climate was to her, and then obviously when she was elected, first in the nation climate chief to sort of oversee the whole deal. What's the difference between what your responsibility is with the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs and from the climate chief, if that's what she's called, the overall climate person? What's the three different sets of jurisdiction?
So DEP is focused on clean air, clean water, protecting our land. So those remain our core mission. Increasingly, we are being brought in on the broader climate conversation. So at the executive, the secretariat level, the secretary has oversight over DEP, Department of Conservation and Recreation, the Department of Energy Resources, so a number of different agencies that all kind of come together with different pieces of that puzzle. We are now working together with the new climate chief, Chief Hoffer, and really taking this kind of whole of government approach, recognizing that climate is kind of a common thread through a lot of the different jurisdictions of all of these different agencies, and working to all be rowing in the same direction, taking advantage of the tremendous federal funding opportunities and making sure that our programs, which are nation leading already, are expanding and advancing to meet those objectives.
In the first Globe story about you, when you were appointed, the words you used that were going to be a centerpiece of your work were transparency and equity. What does that mean in English for people who understand the common usage of the terms and want to know what it means to you?
In action, it means making sure that people have a seat at the table for the impacts and projects that will affect their communities. So if something is proposed in your neighborhood or down the street from you, making sure you have actionable information to understand what that means, what's being proposed, and that you have a stakeholder process that's available to you. You know, not just come down to our office at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday when no one can do that, but actually offering stakeholder processes that people can really participate in.
How about the equity deal?
The equity deal is, as climate is, a common thread through all that we're doing. So my opinion, and I know the opinion of the governor and lieutenant governor as well, is that this is not a separate environmental justice conversation. This is something that needs to be woven into all of our programs, all of our processes.
How do you balance that? Because, you know, we do have what are referred to as environmental justice neighborhoods that are more impacted by climate change, where trees have been removed and it's just hot, it's just 10 degrees hotter in these neighborhoods, or there's pollution like in Chinatown. How do you balance that with the need to do some building of facilities that are going to bring us more toward clean help us have a decreased impact on climate? Sometimes those things end up in those neighborhoods, and sometimes the pushback from the neighborhood is it's going to hurt us more in the short term.
I think balance is exactly the right word. It's all going to be a balance. I've had an interesting conversation with folks recently who view themselves like I do as environmentalists, how being an environmentalist used to mean no development. Any development is bad.
Right.
And now, meeting this moment of this huge point of inflection on climate, we need development. We need to electrify our buildings and our cars. We need to have the clean energy sources to meet that. So that does mean more solar projects, more wind projects, more battery storage projects. I think the environmental justice component of it, it's really important to recognize that being an environmental justice community means that these communities have been historically disadvantaged by those types of projects, among other impacts. It does not mean necessarily that no development should happen there. It means listening to those communities and working with them. They're saying, we don't want to be left behind. We don't want this to be a no-go zone where there's no development and therefore no job training, no economic benefit, and no opportunity. So having an actual interplay and interaction between those communities so that we're citing the right kind of projects in those communities that they want to see and that make sense in that area.
How about, I don't know if this falls within your jurisdiction. If it doesn't, obviously we'll move on. One area where there is conflict between arguably a need and environmental justice and what the community wants is this East Boston substation. Is that part of your bailiwick?
That project was permitted before I came on the job. I think that is an example of a process that we're committed to improving upon, not just aiming to improve
Well, you know,
upon.
the Attorney General, who happens to be the governor, I'm sure you know this, tweeted no energy justice today when it was permitted. So what power does you have to revisit something like this when, again, she said as an Attorney General, this is not energy justice, the exact kind of thing that you say you're here to advance?
Our power is to make sure that processes like that don't happen here again. So making sure that in our permitting processes, our siting decisions, that it is having those types of public participation opportunities in the languages that people speak and with actionable information that we are communicating in a way that people can understand.
So does that mean, I don't know enough procedurally to know that once something's permitted, what power, if any, the governor of a state or the commissioner like you has, like this peaker power plant. Marjorie Egan probably and Charlie Baker every month for 6 months went over this thing. She said, I don't understand why you're building a gas and diesel plant in Peabody and Governor Baker, and I'm not authorized to speak for him, but it's pretty much what he said, is listen, it only happens when there's a problem at peak energy need kind of thing. It's going to be intermittent, it's occasional. A lot of people from Peabody would call the show saying, well, we don't buy that. We're deeply troubled by that. Is that one of those things where once there's a stamp, the stamp stays forever?
I think in terms of an approval in a facility that's already been built, our ongoing authority there is to make sure that they are meeting their permit requirements. So, you know, what they're putting out into the air, how they're operating, making sure that they're not having an adverse impact in unanticipated ways. I think the power we have now going forward is for new facilities or facility expansions to make sure that those types of folks aren't just, you know, being heard here, but also their input is being considered in the permitting process.
Just one last question, Commissioner, about this, and then we'll move on.
Sure.
Is if neither of those things, I know it's a hypothetical, but at least it'll explain where you and the governor are on these kinds of issues. If the East Boston substation nor the peaker power plant in Peabody had been permitted when you were sworn in, would they have gotten the support of this administration?
It's, you know, it's a different time. It's years later in some cases. So I think it would depend on how the public processes that we are putting in place now, how it was received and how it made its way through those processes.
You know, last week I was, you know, had the honor of filling in for Jim. I was co-hosting with Marjorie. We interviewed Caitlin Sachs, who's a senior producer over at Nova. And they've been doing this climate change initiative that it's sort of, I think they're going to do a three-part series. The first is called Weathering the Future. Highly recommend everybody watch it. I think it premiered on April 12th. There's a lot about local efforts to affect climate change, partnering either with local communities or with the state, sometimes just groups of volunteers. Wastewater treatment was one of those things. That was highlighted in California because of drought. And in Massachusetts, we don't think of ourselves, although last year was bad. I think people really started to pay more attention to drought last year. But as a rule, we think of it as an aberration and not a regular thing. I was really sort of pleased to see the awards that the administration has made, both for solid waste and wastewater treatment. Tell people about those.
So we, in recent weeks, have committed $1.4 billion to things like drinking water, wastewater, infrastructure, recycling, business development grants, clean buses. So it really has been a rollout of a lot of grant and low interest loans that are going to, you know, really support expansion in each of these areas. Important to note, those are not, you know, just state tax dollars at work. Again, we're taking advantage of all of the federal funding that's available through the bipartisan infrastructure law and otherwise to make sure that we are putting those dollars to work as well. I saw a great example. It is Earth Week, as you noted. I saw a great example just yesterday of those dollars at work. We were over at the Cambridge Community Center, and one of our grants went to support putting solar on their roof, adding battery storage to store the electrons and deploy them as the center needs them, and biodiesel backup generation. So when there is, you know, the electricity system's down, there's some kind of emergency event, this is the type of place where people in the community gather. There's food, there's heat, you know, we're keeping the lights on and the
warming
heat on
shelters,
there.
cooling shelters, that kind of thing, right?
And those types of grants, seeing them in action, it's really powerful. And that's the type of, you know, supporting a community, supporting the services that they're offering to the community while having that environmental benefit. Those are the wins. I mean, those are the projects we're looking to support and expand.
I have to mention this too. You got a 10% budget increase for all of it's for the entire, I think, for the entire secretariat, not just, I don't think it's just DEP, is it?
10% for DEP.
Just for DEP.
Well, not of the whole state budget. 10% of the 1% that goes to the secretariat. Yeah.
It's still huge. I mean, for you every year, it's either feast or famine. You're always begging for money, and it's very rarely a feast. How does that translate into what you are now going to be able to do that you've not been able to do before?
It is huge. It is not yet final. So we continue to fight for those dollars. That, quite frankly, is part of what attracted me out of the private sector to the public sector.
I was going to ask you why you took the job.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, a big part of it is that climate is not just a conversation that those of us who practice professionally in these areas are having. It's a dinner table, a coffee table conversation. So sort of meeting that moment and having the support at the federal level, really strong support at the state level, and the funding to actually get something done.
It's the money.
It was sort of an if not now, then when question, I asked to myself. To directly answer your question, we need that money to do the protection of the air, protection of the water, protection of the land that remains DEP's core mission, and climate. And PFAS, which I know many of folks have heard about, these forever chemicals that are now in our water, in our air, in our bodies, in our soil. And it's really an evolving area of science and therefore an evolving area of regulation. So it's to continue keeping everyone's drinking water clean and the air you breathe clean, and also to do these other things that are really, the sort of environmental issues of our time.
I assumed what attracted you to the public sector was an opportunity to take a huge pay cut, and obviously that wasn't it. That's attractive, I think. Two things. We're obviously we're talking to Bonnie Hypel, who's the new commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. Two things while you're still here, Commissioner. PFAS stuff. There are bills in the legislature, I know, to partially ban them in certain settings. There'd be much greater disclosure in others. Where are we likely to go? Where can the legislature and the Healy administration go on this huge, I think, almost an existential kind of threat? Where do we go?
I'd agree with you in characterizing it that way. I think it needs to be both the upfront producer responsibility, the companies that are still using these types of substances in their products. We're looking at things like extended producer responsibility. So the fact that those companies would need to see, those products through the life cycle. And also we're looking at the stuff that's already out there, that's already in our water, and what to do about that. So we have some of the most stringent standards in the country here in Massachusetts now. At the federal level, they've proposed even more stringent standards. So kind of coming together and working together with our federal partners to make sure that what is already in our environmental media is addressed and addressed quickly.
Before you go, we talk about this a lot on the show. You mentioned batteries for electric cars before. Probably the most common complaint we get about EVs, I just bought one a few months ago, and by the way, it's my complaint too, so it's not just those people who are saying this, is the frightening paucity of chargers. Absolutely everywhere. And there was a story in the Globe. I've mentioned this a bunch of times. We were talking to Shirley Young from the Globe about it. Her colleague, I think it was Aaron Pressman, wrote a piece about $60 million or something going to new chargers from federal money. And the article in the Globe said, and it will allow for dozens of chargers to be built. And obviously that was a typo until we found out it wasn't a typo. Dozens of chargers only from $60 million. Obviously, I don't have to tell you, we need not dozens, we need thousands of chargers. The fact that there isn't one right here, or where I live in Inman Square in Cambridge, well, they're about to build them there. What's the future, the immediate future look like in terms of what I think, it's not just the price of the car, the fear about the inability to charge your electric vehicle?
That the range anxiety is real. The lack of charging infrastructure is real. I'd agree with you that dozens is not enough. We and the other agencies within the Secretariat are all working on expanding that EV charging infrastructure and also making sure that the electricity that's going into that is produced by clean sources. Yeah. So that's really, it's both on the sourcing end and the charging end.
So what are we going to see on the charging end in the next, 2 years, let's say, the first half of the Healy administration?
You will see a lot more chargers if we have our way. We certainly are taking advantage of the funding on that front and working together with DOER and other agencies to roll that out very quickly.
I want to go back to the PFAS thing for just a second. Regulating manufacturers who are actually making the products that contain these forever chemicals and then wind up in our landfills and then in our water is really difficult. I mean, you made the argument, some have made the argument for centuries that the cost of deregulation is death, and there you have, we just had or came out of a total deregulation administration under Trump. Could Massachusetts do something like California's Proposition 65? So at least you see the warning. If you buy anything, especially if you go to Amazon, you buy anything, you will see if it says, if you're from California, California has Proposition 65, we just want you to know that substantial exposure to these chemicals leads to the following problems. Is it possible for Massachusetts to have sort of its own proposition? And do you know how that would get started?
It's certainly an option that's on the table. I think the danger and some of what we've seen with Prop 65 is that everyone just labels everything then.
So people ignore it?
Well, it just waters down, the meaning of it. When you have a Prop 65 label on your hotel room wall, what are you actually, what information is actually being... It is on everything, that's true. It is on everything. So what's actually being communicated to you when you're just labeling everything? So trying to kind of find a way that you're getting people, again, the information that they need to make informed choices without labeling the world, particularly for things like PFAS that are already, almost ubiquitous in our environment.
Commissioner, we only have a minute left. Final thing. What's the thing, of all the things you've talked about or maybe not talked about, in your new role, what's the one issue you're confronting that is of greatest concern that needs most immediate attention, would you say?
I would say communication across all of these areas. It's, really partnering, I think, with the private sector where it makes sense to do so, where we can, row in the same direction on things like PFAS and climate. That's where we can have our greatest impact, and communication across communities. So historically disadvantaged communities and other communities alike can understand what's going on here, and we can continue to be a leader in these areas.
Good luck, Commissioner. It's great to meet you. We hope to have you back again. Happy Earth Week.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I'm an unapologetic good government person. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Bonnie Heupel, the brand new commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. After a quick break, International Jazz Day is coming at the end of the month, and GBH Music is celebrating a concert honoring the life and legacy of jazz educator, advocate, and legendary GBH broadcaster Eric Jackson. We'll speak with Ken Fields from Jazz Boston, plus GBH Music's Anthony Rudell, and guitarist John Stein in just a moment, with a couple of songs as well. Live Music Friday is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
It's Coachella season, and of course, Bad Bunny is headlining. He just dropped a single with the band Grupo Frontera, who are known for Mexican regional music, a genre with roots that go back 150 years. And now it's topping music charts.
We're talking about all of the world. This is really a watershed moment for the genre.
Hear that on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan is off. She'll be back on Monday. Andrew Cabral is kind enough to sit in. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. The late Eric Jackson was a giant in the jazz world in more ways than one. Teacher, advocate for the arts, and incredible broadcaster. Here's a little bit of Eric. He passed away in 2022. He's talking about his introduction to jazz in an interview backstage at the Newport Jazz Festival. We'll get to that.
I actually grew up in a household where jazz was what was there. My father basically had control of the music in the house. That's what was played. I was at ease listening to jazz, so I felt comfortable if I was downstairs where the stereo was, where the record player was. I was perfectly comfortable listening to jazz.
That was pretty smooth, too. An upcoming concert from GBH Music is honoring Jackson's legacy in the city on, fittingly, International Jazz Day. It's not this Sunday, but next Sunday, the 30th. The concert is called Peace, an in-person and virtual concert for the late Eric Jackson. For more information, we'll tell you again, gbh.org/events. It's sold out, but you can and should watch online. Joining us now are Ken Field, president of Jazz Boston, Anthony Rudell, who is general manager for GBH Music. In a couple of moments, we'll speak to and hear a performance from guitarist John Stein. Ken and Tony, it's good to have you here. Thanks so much for your time.
Good to see you. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you, and good to meet both of you as well. I'm going to start with Tony. Tell us a little bit about sort of the evolution of GBH Music. There are lots of relationships that have sort of come together and stayed together to create this entity.
So you heard about a pandemic. Okay.
Vaguely, in passing.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we were sitting around and saying, what can we do? I was running WCRB, which is our classical station, and I was talking to Eric and I was talking to Brian O'Donovan. So we had Celtic jazz and classical, and we said, what can we do to keep music connected to people who are locked in their homes? And then there was that amazing Memorial Day weekend in 2020 when Yo-Yo Ma played the complete Bach cello suites from our studio, which we streamed worldwide to more than 500,000 people.
Wow.
And so that was the moment when GBH Music was born. And we said, let's put it all together, put it all under one roof, and let's invest in what we do really well, which is connecting audiences to music. And Ken and I were introduced by Eric, who was on Ken's board at Jazz Boston, and Eric and I were working together. And let me just say, I've a lot of years of radio. The only person who has ever intimidated me is Eric Jackson. Okay, let's be clear. I mean, the man is a legend. And so the first time we met virtually, as him reporting to me, I said, what can I do for you? He said, help jazz. And he introduced me to Ken, and then I think it was that fall we started doing our first in-studio concerts.
Can you, I realize as we're introducing you gentlemen, Ken and Tony, anybody who's been in Boston for a while knows of or knew Eric. There are probably some new people in town, some younger listeners who don't. Spend a minute on who this guy was.
Well, Eric was all over the jazz, the GBH airwaves, and before that, BCN airwaves. And Eric had such a amazing grasp of the music, love for the music, and voice. He had the definition of a radio voice, and he came into people's homes back when, every night, and it was part of the family.
When you say part of the family, I have to say, we had Brian O'Donovan on yesterday. I've said to Brian many a time, I didn't even like Celtic music until I started listening to you, and you've introduced the whole world to Celtic music, who now loves it. I sort of feel the same way about Eric and jazz. For those of us who are not there, when I moved here, I don't know how many years ago, I first listened to Eric, long before I knew him, and he's the one who introduced me and drew me in. I'm not an aberration in that regard.
Right. No, I think, and one of the things about Eric was that he had a broad view of what jazz was.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He had a experience with other styles of music, with rock music, when he did the BCN work. So he was able to engage a lot of people who didn't think maybe they even liked jazz, to understand that this was an important music. And it's important music for a number of reasons. It's important music because it came out of the black community. It's important music and unique music because it's based on spontaneous improvisation. That's somewhat unique, and he captured that.
I wanted to say that as a broadcaster, Eric had the magic. He has what we call the ability to sell a song. And in our business, in the music side of the equation, that's what radio is about, is bringing people into your world and selling them a song. And I'll tell you a great story. There was a point in my career where I owned part of a record label, and we had a jazz division. And one day I was talking to Eric about Stanley Turrentine, great sax player. And he started talking to me about the album. And I said, wow, I got to go home and get that album. And then I realized I'd produced that album. and he basically sold it to me again. And that was his magic, his ability to say, you got to listen to this because your life will be better for it.
Tony Rudell and Ken Field. Tony, tell us a little bit about the Peace concert on the 30th.
So Eric passed away in September, and I am honored that one of his last phone calls was to me. and from the hospital, and we had a long talk. And I was driving at the time. I had to pull off the road. And we talked about things to do. And I don't know if you know, we dedicated one of our studios. His studio was dedicated as the Eric Jackson studio, which is so cool. And then Ken and I were talking, and I said, we got to do something over the top and special. And so April 30th is International Jazz Day. This is Jazz Month. And working with Ken, and we've worked very closely for 3 years now, we've pulled together what I think is an amazing assemblage of music, top to bottom, that reflects Eric's sort of view. Terrific artists. We have John Stein here who's helped us put it together. And the studio, we're doing it in Calderwood, which isn't even an audio studio, it's a TV studio, but we've gotten really good at doing audio in there. And we're going to stream it because it is full. You can't get in. So that was the genesis of it. And then Ken and John have put it together with us.
Well, John's going to join us in a minute, but before he does, he's going to play for us. What's John going to play, Ken?
Well, John's going to play Peace, the Horace Silver piece, the Horace Silver song that was Eric's theme song.
Here he is, John Stein, playing Peace. Welcome. Beautiful. Totally beautiful piece.
It was gorgeous.
So Ken Field is sticking around. Tony Riddell is somewhere there. Hi, Tony. Thanks for your time. John is going to join us in a couple of minutes. Can you explain to people who've never heard the expression, what's second line mean, and what does it have to do with the concert on the 30th there, Ken Field?
Well, the second line is a New Orleans tradition. It came out of the New Orleans funeral tradition, and it has to do with honoring the person who's passed with a combination of sadness and joy. That's a summary, and it's a powerful tradition, and it's a tradition that I personally have a connection to. And we're going to honor Eric with the second line at the beginning of this event. We're going to march in, assuming good weather, from outside into the building. We're soliciting any musician, any mobile musician in the Boston area who wants to join us for that second line.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, because, you know, you can only have a limited number of people on the stage performing. And John has curated an amazing concert. But, you know, you have 10 people, something like that. There are hundreds of people, musicians in Boston, who were incredibly impacted by Eric, who loved Eric in all kinds of ways. And so to allow them to participate in this way, and we hope that people will sign up. You have to sign up. You go to jazzboston.org. On the front page, you can sign up, register to be part of that second line. And it's something I'm very much looking forward to be able to both have the sadness at Eric's passing and the joy of his life in the same moment.
John Stein has joined us. That was totally beautiful, John. Really beautiful, and thanks for playing it for us.
My pleasure.
Give us a minute, your recollections and thoughts about Eric.
Well, I moved to Boston in 1980, let's say. That's when I moved to Boston, and it was right around the time, more or less, that Eric began broadcasting And so the entire time I've been in Boston since 1980, he's been a part of my musical life. I came to be a student at Berkeley. I wasn't exactly young when I showed up, but the fact is he's been part of my life ever since 1980. And because I performed in Boston quite a bit, I got an opportunity to be on his program quite a number of times. CD releases, he would have me on to talk about it, or gigs. Two most special times, he actually invited me to be a guest host. And I sat with him for his entire time. In those hours, I think it was either 8 or 7 till midnight or 8 till midnight. And I got to choose the music. He had me choose music about guitar players, which of course is my specialty. So that was just a special time for me. But because of that, I did spend quite a bit of time with him, and also saw him around town because he would guest host all kinds of jazz events throughout Boston. So I got to know him a little bit and had a very nice, warm relationship with him.
Do you know why he chose that piece to be his signature song?
Well, I don't know, but Eric had a very even and beautiful, peaceful vibe about him. I mean, and I think he wanted to be, and he began every show with that song. And I think it was just a table setter. Here's a little thing that I'll throw out there. I remember in the old days, friends of mine who had young children, and they would actually put their kids to bed listening to Eric's show, because that's how he began the show, with that sort of just vibe of beautiful, peaceful music. And of course, jazz can be all kinds of things. It can be hectic and crazy, it can be beautiful, it can be mellow, but he managed to do all of that stuff. So,
Ken, we should have asked you, what's Jazz Boston? We've talked a lot about it, mentioned a lot. Fill in the blanks for us.
I'm glad you asked.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Jim. Jazz Boston is an organization that's been around since 2006. We advocate for the Boston area jazz community. That's musicians, audiences, venues, media. And we do what we can to raise the profile of jazz, to make sure people know about this important music, as I said before, and to give opportunities to audiences, to musicians, and raise up this music.
How's the profile of jazz doing in Boston?
It's incredible. There's a vibe. There had been a vibe. There was a thing. Jazz is dead. Jazz is not dead. Jazz is thriving in a very big way. We have 4,600 members of Jazz Boston, and when we send out an email, 60% of them open our emails. That's pretty extraordinary. And so there's jazz happening all over. There's venues that are presenting jazz more than ever. We've lost a number of venues over the past couple of years. The pandemic was pretty brutal on everyone. But in my opinion, jazz is thriving. Young people are being drawn to this spontaneous, energetic creation of music.
Terrific.
I wanted to ask both of you the impact of working with someone whose knowledge of jazz is so encyclopedic and whose ability to educate is so accessible. What's the impact that it's had on you personally? And I'll start with you, but on your work, as you go forward with your work, having known Eric for as long as you did.
Well, I haven't known Eric as long as John has, I'll say, but John did serve on our board for many years, and I would say the impact of knowing Eric in that regard was just seeing his commitment to the music that he loved and the music that he thought a lot of people loved, and his impact or his drive was extended beyond his radio show. It extended to the community. It extended to how can he educate people, as you say, how can he raise up this music and do, fulfill our mission. How did it affect me personally? Much the way it affected everyone in Boston. I heard him every night. I loved to listen to him. He started out, as John said, his show kind of low key. And he then, later in the evening, would introduce more, experimental work, more challenging work. And you asked about the song called Peace. Well, you know that he ended every show with the words, "Have a good evening, have a peaceful evening," or something like that. I think that's right. So peace was on his mind.
John?
Well, for me personally, I don't know, I just enjoyed knowing him as a person. I guess I want to say this. Jazz musicians are obsessive, and they're scholars. Most jazz musicians, not all. And Eric was not a musician. I talked to him about this at one point, and he said, well, I'm not really a musician, but he thought like a musician, and he studied like a musician, and he educated himself about all the music and different styles and the players the way a musician would. So even though he was not personally a musician, he was as deep into the music as people like myself and Ken and other jazz musicians who devote their lives to it.
You know, before you both are going to play for us in a second, you'll tell us what you're going to play. But before you do, is there anything else we should know about this concert that we didn't ask you about? Well, I know that Emmett Price, who's one of our favorites with us every Monday, he's going to be part of the things.
Yes.
James Burnett is going to be, I believe, emceeing the thing, our other colleague. Anything else we should know?
I think you should know that people should know that they can watch it. It's sold out in person. There was tremendous demand for people to attend this event. People, as we know, we loved Eric. But you can watch it in person. If you can watch it, online, and you can participate if you're a musician who plays a mobile instrument. We don't really need to bring pianos or cellos, but you can join the second line. You go to jazzboston.org to do that.
And if you want to watch it online, the whole gbh.org/events. John, what are you going to play, you two?
We're going to play, is it a spiritual?
We're going to play a traditional second line piece called Just a Closer Walk with Thee.
Fabulous. Thank you both for being here. They're going to go over to the area where their instruments are. We appreciate it. And again, if you want to watch this, and I can't imagine who would not want to, as they said, the tickets are sold out, which is predictable. You can watch it online at gbh.org/events. Now, Ken Field on saxophone, John Stein on guitar. We're almost there. Ken is saying, keep talking, Jim, as we're doing this. They are preparing.
Well, do we make sure people know it's April 21st?
It's not April 21st.
I thought it's not this Sunday. It's next Sunday,
It's April 30th, right.
I'm sorry,
April
it's April 30th. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday.
Why don't you do that? Say that slowly while they're trying to get ready. What date is it again?
April 30th,
That's
Jim.
April 30th. In honor of the great Eric Jackson, and no one is more deserving of a tribute. And this sounds like one hell of a tribute. Here are John Stein and Ken Field.
absolutely fantastic. That was a perfect ending to another Live Music Friday here on GBH at the BPL. We've been speaking with Jazz Boston President Ken Field, guitarist John Stein, and GBH General Music Manager Tony Rudell. They're putting on a show honoring the legacy of Eric Jackson, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, April 30th. Tickets are sold out, but it'll be viewable online. For more information, go to gbh.org/events. After a quick break, we're returning to a perennial BPR topic, rats. I support them. Apparently, Jim thinks they should all bow to his will. Where are you on rats? Give us a call, 877-301-8970, or text us. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
This Earth Day, we're going green. And black and red and brown. And oh yeah, we're queering it too. Join us.
Safety Insurance. They'll help you manage life's storms. And Central Square Theater, presenting Angels in America, Tony Kushner's play about hope, struggle, and human connection in the early days of the AIDS crisis in New York. Runs through May 21st. CentralSquareTheater.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Andrew Cabral sitting in for Marjorie. Marjorie's back Monday. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. We were inspired today by a profile in the New York Times of New York's new rat czar, and that paper's incredible collection of rat horror stories. Listen to this one. This is in the Times. This guy, Ben Regenspan, he's 37, became one of the unlucky New Yorkers to witness a rat emerge from his toilet. Mr. Regenspan heard a splashing around while brushing his teeth. Quote, I screamed, flushed, he swam back down. I poured in a bunch of cleaning products and flushed again. Now, if you think that's just New York, per Axios, Boston is the rattiest city in the nation, citing a survey that found something like 22% of people here report a rodent sighting, as in a rat, not a mouse, in Boston, beating Philly and somehow even New York City. So in our remaining moments, 877-301-8970, tell us your rat stories, and do you think we should be doing more to rid ourselves of these rodent invaders, or are you with my co-host today, Andrew Cabral, who apparently wants to preserve their life and pleasure? The number is 877-301-8970. What's with you and rats?
You are exaggerating.
What's your position?
First, let me say this.
Yeah.
In the pantheon of historically bad job titles, rat czar has got to be in the top 5.
I have to say, as soon as I'm done with this job, that's my hope for the next thing.
You're going to become the rat czar?
Cambridge's rat czar. That's my dream. What's your second point?
Good luck to you and the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah.
It's not a point of supporting rats. I think my point is that, as with all animals, humans are the most invasive species on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And we think everything needs to get out of our way or
Correct.
can't be, icky like bugs can't be icky, or can't be a rat that scurries across your foot because we're here, so everything should get out of our way. And that's what I sort of object to, is the notion that we consume every inch of every space
we do.
We inhabit and expect other things to conform.
So let me just be clear. So a rat scurrying across your foot, hey, they're entitled to the territory. It's fine. Is that right?
For the most part, yes.
Uh-huh.
I've never had that encounter, and maybe I'm able to say that because I've actually never had that encounter, but I've certainly had encounters with mice, and I pretty much I have mice that make a trek through seasonally I can just hear them. I don't know where they're going. And I'm not putting out traps. Live and let live. Just keep on your way. It's that kind of thing.
We want to know what your perspective is on her perspective. And we also want to know what if you have rat stories of your own. By the way, 2 things from the concert, Donna or Eric Jackson. 1, it's free. We should have said that. And 2, I called James Bennett II James Burnett. My apologies. Obviously, the great James Bennett II is James Bennett II. So let's hear what you have to say about rats. By the way, have you ever encountered a rat?
No, well, I've certainly seen them. Like you'll see something scurry and you'll go, oh, okay. You'll think to yourself, okay, that was a rat.
That's called encountering a rat.
Right. I mean, but not a personal encounter, like it coming close enough to scurry over my foot. And I will say, the stories in the New York Times are horrifying.
They're unbelievable.
You wake up and you have rat feces in your bed.
Yeah.
Then
they got to sleep somewhere, Andrea, as you would say.
Well, that's true. They do have to sleep somewhere, and they have to go to the bathroom somewhere.
Exactly.
So there's a logical way to approach it, and then there's this sort of more human reaction of being absolutely horrified and getting rid of that bed as soon as possible. But there are a lot of them, and they are everywhere. This is where the food is.
Is that our fault too?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean because we should throw things out? We should
because
consume
of the way
more.
Pizza Rat found that piece of pizza
greatest video of all time.
Right, it's very true. But found that piece of pizza on the street because we throw things away the way we throw things away.
Yeah, let me tell you, Andrea's philosophy, with who could disagree, is you have a pizza, obviously a rat should have a piece also, because they've got to eat. Is that not correct?
I think it's just the way, sort of, it's more of a commentary on my part. I'm not expecting people to, sort of live with rats.
Yeah.
But it's a commentary on my part on the way we occupy and fail to kind of respect the space that we live in.
I think that's legitimate.
I never told you the story.
You and Cy Montgomery would get along very well, by the way.
As sheriff, you get powers under Chapter 90. I could arguably pull somebody over and all of that other kind of stuff. I, as a general rule, didn't do that. The one time I did do it was when I was behind a car, and I see the passenger side window go down, and out comes a half-eaten slice of pizza and a half-eaten piece of chicken, and I was absolutely furious. And it's not a good way to pull people over when you're really mad. I didn't arrest anybody, but I did pull the car over, and it was hysterical. There was a woman in the passenger seat. There was a guy in the driver's seat. And as soon as the window went down, the woman looked at me and said, I told him not to do it. He had literally thrown it across.
Great.
And she was quick to say, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, I told him he shouldn't do that and throw food out into the street like that. On the other hand, she could have been lying, it could have been her. But it's that kind of disrespect. And so who do you think is going to come and pick up that food?
That's on that one, I'm with you.
Pizza Rat is at your disposal if that's what you choose to do.
Let's go to Megan in Somerville. You're first on the Rat Hour here on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Hi, Megan.
Hey, Megan.
Wow, I'm honored.
We are too. Hi.
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 I have, in fact, had a rat in my apartment. It came up through the toilet.
Oh, my God.
Go ahead. Yeah, it was something.
Well, I mean, let's hear what the something was.
How did you happen to notice that?
Well, when I went to go use the facilities.
That's what I was trying to make you say.
And?
Yeah.
What'd you do about it?
I panicked. And then I slammed the lid, and then I slammed the bathroom door, and I called my dad, as you do, and about 4 other friends. And then eventually I just started flushing over and over and over again.
And I assume since you didn't say something horrible happened, the rat disappeared. I have to say, and I don't mean this to evoke a laugh, I would move the next day if that happened. How do you go, like the next day, when you flushed and the rat is theoretically gone, how traumatizing is going into the bathroom?
Oh, this was 10 years ago, and I still check the toilet every single time I use the bathroom.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, you have to pretty much do that for the rest of your life. Thanks for that call,
By the way,
Megan.
before you go away, we've just been alerted by our lead producer, Jamie, that Megan is a friend of Jamie's, and he is attesting to the accuracy of description, writing to us. He has seen the scratch marks on the toilet. That is disgusting. Megan, thank you for the call, and you have a pretty good friend there, that guy.
See,
welcome again.
I think SNL had it right. We're going to play a clip
What's
of
this?
SNL did a skit about this very thing. SNL has it right. Listen to how enthusiastic these visitors to New York were about rats.
Lisbeth, move a titch. There is either a very tiny chihuahua or a very big rat upon your shoulder.
Looks like I made a little friend.
I'm not sorry, but I'm going to say it. New York rats are great.
Yeah.
They are great.
That's how Megan feels about
See,
Somerville
I'm not
rats.
that bad. I don't know that would necessarily be my
It's
enthusiastic
absolutely
reaction.
terrifying. By the way, I'll raise my right hand. I have lived in a house that my family owns for decades. If we had a rat come out of the toilet, honest to God, I'd put it on the market tomorrow. I don't. How did she go? It's your buddy. How did she go back in the bathroom the next day? Did you have to go with her? Talking to Jamie, I mean, Lucy and Mashpee, I'm terrified of rats. Terrified. Lucy and Mashpee, hey.
Hi, how are you?
We're excellent. We're having a great time here. What's up?
Okay, so I'm living in Mashpee now, but a year ago, January, I moved from JP.
Yeah.
And I had a bowl of fruit sitting on the kitchen table.
Sure.
And there was a banana missing.
Yeah.
And I went to the bathroom,
Yeah.
and it was on the floor next to the bathtub.
How'd it get there?
I looked under the bathtub,
Yeah.
and under the lip of the bathtub
Yeah.
was a big hole. And it had carried the banana from the kitchen table into
right.
the bathroom, but because of the shape of the banana, it couldn't get it through the hole.
Understood.
I don't know how you
there
can
and
fail
kept coming
to.
back.
I don't know how you can fail to applaud that level of resourcefulness.
Yeah, and also, Lucy, to channel Andrea, rats have to eat. You know what I mean?
I mean, I understand. So I took a sheet of aluminum,
Sure.
solid aluminum, not aluminum foil,
Yeah.
and drilled it to cover the hole after I sprayed spray insulation in there.
Great.
And called the landlord, but this is right near the center of JP, and the whole neighborhood had a problem. And eventually someone from the city came to make sure everyone had rat
Right.
traps around their house.
So is that why you moved to Mashpee?
No, actually, I'd never seen anything like that before in my life, but once I patched up the hole.
Everything's
But
great.
I will say that the rats are not as big as this is New York City. The rats in New York City are like twice the size of the ones in JP, if that means anything.
Yeah.
We have small colonial rats, small pilgrim-like rats.
Lucy, thank you for the call. Didn't you say to me this morning when we were contemplating doing this, are there going to be people who've had rat experiences? Everybody has had a rat experience in this city. It's horrible. We are the rat capital, according to Axios, of the United States, the most ratified of any community in America. Literally.
Don't you think that somewhere there is a very tiny studio with two rat co-hosts where they're asking how many people have had a human experience?
No, there are probably two AI co-hosts who are wondering about a human experience.
Well, did you ever see the movie Willard? You're terrified of rats. Remember
Is that the
movie?
Michael Jackson song?
Well, he did the song Ben that went
Ben,
in it.
I'm sorry, Ben,
But
not
that was a
Willard.
movie that had tons of rats in it.
Yeah, I could
that was
not.
Bruce Davidson, by the way, that
Who the
played
hell is
Willard.
he?
He's now sort of a veteran actor. You've
I
seen
don't
maybe you haven't seen him in
Yeah.
a million things because you're not a pop culture kind of a guy.
Well, I'm sort of
But
semi-pop
he's been
culture.
in the X-Men movies. He's done. He's actually done some other really good stuff too.
Well, that's
but
nice to hear. Let's go.
but-
We have another Megan.
I'll send you a copy of the movie just so that
I
you can
wish
watch
you
it
would.
and freak out.
Thank you. Megan, you're in a car. We're talking about rats. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for taking another call from a Megan.
Great.
Hi, Megan.
Our pleasure.
So I used to frequent a poetry reading in the basement of a dive bar in Central Square.
Oh,
and
great.
I'll leave the name out of it. But when it would get too crowded, they would have people sit on the stage. And I was sitting on the stage, and the poet was doing his thing, and I felt fur up against my leg. And
Nice.
for a split second, I was thinking, oh, my dog is here. You know how you can have, like...
Yeah, like a
single
disconnect
moment.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait, that's not possible. And I looked down,
Yeah.
and I'm looking down at the rat, and the rat's looking up at me.
That's great.
And then it just darted out into the crowd, and I looked up and made eye contact with one other person who saw it happen. Nobody else was privy to it. The poet just kept reading his poem.
Huh.
And, yeah, that was my close encounter with
It's
a
a
rat.
beautiful story, Megan. You have any questions for Megan about her close encounter?
No. You
That's
said
beautiful.
everybody has had an
rat
encounter with a rat.
Yeah.
Right.
So how long did it take you to recover from that, Megan?
to be honest, I'm kind of an animal lover, and I was
Good
like,
for you, Megan.
That was actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
See?
Okay, kind of cool.
I'm
Megan,
not
thanks for
alone.
the call. Can we get one more in here? Because these are really, where are we? Oh, here we have Daniel, also in Somerville. What's your deal? Quickly, you have a minute. What's up?
Hey, happy Friday.
And to you.
I guess my main experience with rats is that my cat will gift me some dead ones every couple months.
Great.
Yep. Well, I think we should just have what they have in Turkey is they just have cats running around the street and everyone takes care of the cats and the cats kill the rats. And
Well, wait, excuse me. You have to watch some videos, which you obviously have not, of a cat starting to pursue a rat, and all of a sudden the rat turns and starts chasing the cat, and that is not atypical. So the damn rats, like those Norway rats, are so big that cats are no longer the solution, Daniel, but nice try.